طيب، بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما إلى علمنا. Inshallah, we'll pick back, or we'll continue with reading from the book known as the Muwatta of Imam Malik ibn Anas ibn Malik ibn Abi Amr al-Asbahi rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year 179. And we're reading from that riwayah of Abu Mus'ab Ahmed ibn Abi Bakr ibn al-Qasim al-Zuhri rahimahullah ta'ala. Ahmed ibn Abi Bakr, who was known as Abu Mus'ab al-Zuhri rahimahullah ta'ala. And we just finished the fifth hadith, if you will, the fifth narration in the Muwatta. So, like we like to do every time, it doesn't hurt to review it all. Let's start somewhere else this time, that first hadith.
قال أبو مصعب أحمد بن أبي بكر الزهري عن شهاب
حدثنا مالك
عن شهاب عن ابن شهاب أن عمر بن عبد العزيز أخر صلاة يوما فدخل عليه عروة بن الزبير فأخبره أن المغيرة بن شعبة أخر الصلاة يوما فدخل عليه ابن مسعود الأنصاري وهو بالكوفة. فدخل عليه ابن مسعود الأنصاري فقال: ما هذا يا مغيرة؟ أليس قد علمت أن جبريل عليه الصلاة والسلام نزل فصلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم صلى 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 رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم قال: بهذا أمرت. فقال عمر لعروة: اعلم ما تحدث، أمرت أن جبريل عليه الصلاة والسلام اعلم ما تحدث يا عروة، إن جبريل عليه الصلاة والسلام هو أقام لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وقت الصلاة. فقال عروة: كذلك كان بشير بن مسعود يحدث عن أبيه. فقال عروة: كذلك كان بشير بن أبي مسعود يحدث عن أبيه. فقال عروة: ولقد حدثتني عائشة زوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إن كان يصلي العصر والشمس في حجرتها قبل أن تظهر.
نعم، جزاكم الله خير. الحديث الذي بعده.
حدثنا أبو مصعب قال حدثنا مالك عن زيد بن أسلم عن عطاء بن يسار أنه قال: جاء رجل إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم سأله عن وقت الصلاة الصبح، قال: فسكت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عنه حتى إذا كان من الغد صلى الصبح حين طلع الفجر، ثم صلى الصبح من الغد ثم صلى الصبح من الغد بعد أن أسفر، ثم قال: أين سائل عن وقت الصلاة؟ قال: فقال: ها أنا ذا يا رسول الله. قال: ما بين هذين وقت.
نعم. قال مالك حدثنا يحيى بن سعيد عن عمرة، قال مالك عن يحيى بن سعيد عن عمرة بنت عبد الرحمن عن عائشة رضي الله تعالى عنها زوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنها قالت: إن كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ليصلي الصبح فينصرف النساء متلفعات بملوطهن ما يعرفن من الغلس.
قال أبو مصعب حدثنا مالك عن زيد بن أسلم بن عطاء بن يسار وعن بسر بن سعيد وعن الأعرج يحدثونه عن أبي هريرة أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: من أدرك ركعة من الصبح قبل أن تطلع الشمس فقد أدرك الصبح، ومن أدرك ركعة من العصر قبل أن تغرب الشمس فقد أدرك العصر.
قال ابن مصعب قال حدثنا مالك عن نافع مولى عبد الله بن عمر أن عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه كتب إلى عماله أن أهم أمركم عند الصلاة من حفظها أو حافظ عليها حفظ دينه، ومن ضيعها فهو لمن سواها أضيع. ثم كتب أن صلوا الظهر إذا كان الفيء ذراعا إلى أن يكون ظل أحدكم مثله وصل والعصر والشمس بيضاء نقية قدر ما يسير الراكب ثلاث فراسخ قدر ما يسير الراكب فرسخين أو ثلاثة. والمغرب إذا غربت الشمس والعشاء إذا غاب الشفق إلى ثلث الليل فمن نام فلا نامت عينه فمن نام فلا نامت عينه وصلي الصبح والشمس بادية مشتبكة والنجوم بادية مشتبكة.
نعم. وصلي الصبح. I'm pretty sure it's وصلي الصبح because the first one is two والصبح. Okay, so it's the last one وصلي الصبح, right? Yeah, the وصلي العتمة. Yeah, you're right.
It's just one after.
Yeah. The second one is every other salat. Yeah, you're right. والصبح والنجوم بادية مشتبكة.
حديث ضعيف.
ها؟
حديث ضعيف لهذا الحديث.
الذي بعده حديث
بعد
أبي سهيل.
أبي سهيل بن مالك.
أي.
تفضل.
طيب. قال مالك عن عمه أبي سهيل بن مالك عن أبيه أن عمر بن الخطاب كتب إلى أبي موسى الأشعري أن صل الظهر إذا زاغ الشمس والعصر والشمس بيضاء نقية وصل المغرب إذا قبل أن يدخلها السفرة وصل المغرب إذا غربت الشمس والعشاء وأخر العشاء ما لم تنم وصل الصبح والنجوم بادية واقرأ فيها بسورتين طويلتين من المفصل.
قال أبو موسى حدثنا مالك عن هشام بن عروة عن أبيه أن عمر بن الخطاب كتب إلى أبي موسى الأشعري أن صلى العصر والشمس
بادية نقية
قدر ما يسير الراكب ثلاث فراسخ ويسر العتمة بين كونين شريف الليل ولا تكون من الغافلين.
قال موسى قال حدثنا مالك عن إسحاق بن أبي طلحة عن إسحاق بن عبد الله بن طلحة
بن أبي طلحة
عن أنس بن مالك أنه قال كنا نصلي العصر ثم يخرج الإنسان إلى بني عمرو بن عوف فيجدهم يصلون العصر.
قال مالك عن يزيد بن زياد عن عبد الله بن رافع مولى أم سلمة رضي الله تعالى عنها زوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه سأل أبا هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه عن وقت الصلاة فقال أبو هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه فأنا أخبرك صل الظهر إذا كان ظلك مثلك والعصر وظلك وصل العصر إذا كان ظلك مثليك. نعم صح. صل الظهر إذا كان ظلك مثلك وصل العصر إذا كان ظلك مثليك والمغرب إذا غربت الشمس والعشاء ما بينك وبين ثلث الليل فإن نمت إلى نصف الليل فلا نامت عينك وصل الصبح بغلس.
قال أبو موسى حدثنا مالك عن ابن شهاب عن أنس بن مالك أنه قال كنا نصلي العصر ثم يدخل الله إلى قباء والشمس مرتفعة.
قال موسى قال حدثنا مالك عن ربيعة بن عبد الرحمن عن ربيعة بن أبي عبد الرحمن عن القاسم بن محمد أنه قال ما أدركت الناس إلا وهم يصلون الظهر بعشي.
طيب. So with that we finished the first bab وقوت الصلاة كما قال أبو مصعب باب وقوت الصلاة. And like this we're going to continue to review just this bab. If you want to continue in your memorization that's fine, but we're only going to review the hadith of this bab until we finish the sharh of this bab. That way inshallah يكون ثابت عندنا. It'll be well established with us. Last week we covered the hadith of Abi Hurairah من أدرك ركعة من الصبح قبل أن تطلع الشمس فقد أدرك الصبح ومن أدرك ركعة من العصر قبل أن تغرب الشمس أو الشمس فقد أدرك العصر. And the main thing we wanted to understand about this hadith, because we talked about how the explanation can be tricky, and we mentioned a lot of extra points and a lot of things that were kind of off topic, or not off topic, but there's a lot of disagreement that this hadith is used to prove it, and to prove what's valid and what's the correct opinion and what's not. Memorizing all of that ikhtilaf can be complicated. So the easier thing to do is memorize the point of the hadith, and then know that the point of that hadith is what they disagree about and the different things that they disagree about. So the point of that hadith we talked about, we said, "Man adraka rak'atan min as-subh qabla an tatlu'a ash-shams, faqad adraka as-subh." The point of that hadith is about the time of prayer and about what is considered to be establishing the salat during its appropriate time. So if you pray a rak'ah before the next time come in, you've caught that time, and that salat is considered to be ada'an. It's considered to be a salat that you are performing on time. So as long as you catch a rak'ah from any salat, then it's considered to be catching the salat on time and not making up. And likewise, if you could have caught a rak'ah from any time, then that time was obligatory upon you. That's the point of it. If you caught a rak'ah, you caught the time. If you could have caught a rak'ah, then you could have caught the time. And so like this, we understand all of the differences of opinions that enter into this topic, right? How much of the salat do you have to catch before it's considered not prayed on time? That's a question. How much of the salat do you have to catch before it's considered that you didn't pray it on time? A whole rak'ah, right? And we talked about, because he said, "Man adraka rak'ah," and we talked about a rak'ah is from qiyam to the two sujuds. So if you didn't catch a whole rak'ah, then you didn't catch the prayer on time. And then from there, it becomes easier to remember the disagreement. Some of the scholars say, no, you only have to catch even just the takbirah during the right time. Some of the scholars say, no, you have to catch at least a sajda during the time, right? Is it the entirety of the rak'ah or just a portion of the rak'ah? But by memorizing the hadith, whoever catches a rak'ah, then he's caught the time, you know the foundation. And that's what Imam Malik is bringing it for. Likewise, whoever could have caught a rak'ah, how much of the time do you have to catch before we say you have to had made that salah? You've had to caught at least the amount of a rak'ah. So if a woman was on her period, and she comes off of her period, and there wasn't enough time to make a rak'ah, does she have to pray? Does she have to make up that salah? Right? She comes off right before Maghrib with less time than is needed to make a rak'ah. This hadith would say no, she doesn't. And from there you can remember the disagreement. Did she have enough time to make wudu and a rak'ah? Does she have enough time for wudu or a rak'ah? Likewise, a traveler. If a traveler is at home before he leaves with enough time to pray a rak'ah from Asr, does he have to pray the complete salat, or can he shorten when he travels, right? And even though the apparentness of this hadith, it gives you the thought that he would have to pray 4 rak'ah even after he travels because he was at home as a resident. And this is the disagreement in that topic. So the point of it is just by understanding the point of the hadith, you understand all of the disagreement that comes off of the hadith. And so the point of the hadith is, if you actually caught a rak'ah, then you've caught the salah. And if you did not catch a rak'ah, then you didn't catch the salah, according to the understanding in this hadith. And then likewise, if you could have caught a rak'ah, then you could have caught the salah. And so if you could have caught the salat, then it's obligatory upon you to perform it. But if you couldn't have caught a rak'ah, then you couldn't have caught the salah, and therefore it's not obligatory upon you to perform it. From the things that we didn't mention last time, and there's a lot, but from the things that we didn't mention is Abu Hurairah, he only mentions Salat al-Subh and Salat al-Asr. Why? Is this rule valid in all of the salats, or is it just valid about Salat al-Subh and Salat al-Asr? Well, think about what we talked about last time. What about Salat al-Jum'ah? You have to catch a what? You have to catch a rak'ah. So the hadith is valid for all of the salat. You have to catch a rak'ah of dhuhr for you to be praying dhuhr on time. You have to catch a rak'ah of isha to be considered praying isha on time, right? If that's the case, if this hadith is valid for all of the salat, then why did Abu Hurairah only mention subh and maghrib? I'm sorry, subh and asr.
Does it have to do anything with switching of daylight to night and night to day?
Partially, yes. They say that he only mentioned subh and asr because these are the two bookends of the day. The day starts with Salat al-Subh and it ends with Salat al-Asr, i.e. the daytime. And these are two times that are what? The salat during those times is what? The salat when the sun is rising is makruh or haram, al-awqat al-manhiyya. And the salat when the sun is setting is waqtul manhi. And so by him emphasizing these two times, it was meant to let you know that a person might come and the sun is setting and he doesn't know what he should do. Should he pray or not? Right? The sun is setting. He hasn't prayed Asr yet. Should he pray or not? The Prophet said, don't pray after Asr. And the people have prayed Asr. And the sun is setting. And it's yellow. And it's only half the sun going down behind the horizon. Should he pray or not? من أدرك ركعة من العصر قبل أن تغرب الشمس فقد أدرك العصر. So this hadith, he specified Salat al-Fajr and Salat al-Asr because of what a person might incorrectly think, that they should delay praying until after the sun rises or until after the sun sets. And if that's the case as it relates to times that are prohibited, then that's even more the case as it relates to times that are not prohibited, like Isha, like Dhuhr, and like Maghrib. So that was the gist of, what that previous hadith, the hadith of Abi Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, covered. In front of us today, we have the hadith of Malik. He says, عن نافع مولى عبد الله ibn Umar أن عمر بن الخطاب كتب إلى عماله أن أهم أمركم عندي الصلاة من حفظها أو حافظ عليها حفظ دينه ومن ضيعها فهو لما سواها أضيع. ثم كتب أن صلوا الظهر إذا كان الفيء ذراع أن صلوا الظهر والفيء الذراع إذا كان الفيء الذراع إذا كان فيء الذراع إلى أن يكون ظل أحدكم مثله والعصر والشمس بيضاء نقية قدر ما يسير الراكب فرسخين أو ثلاثة والمغرب إذا غربت الشمس والعشاء إذا غاب الشمس إلى شفق إذا غاب الشفق إلى ثلث الليل. جزاكم الله خير. والعشاء إذا غاب الشفق إلى ثلث الليل فمن نام فلا نامت عينه فمن نام فلا نامت عينه فمن نام فلا نامت عينه وصل الصبح والصبح والنجوم بادية مشتبكة والصبح والنجوم بادية مشتبكة. طيب, this hadith needs to be read along with the hadith of Hisham, as well as the hadith of Abi Suhail, as well as the hadith of Abi Hurairah. All of these hadith should be read together. All right, so we're going to intertwine some of the conversation in each of them because they should all be read together. But we'll still go through them and add and fill in any of the blanks with Allah's permission as we go down the line. But these 4 hadith, the hadith of Umar from the first one, this one we just did, and Nafi', the hadith of Nafi', the hadith of Malik, yani Abu Abi Suhail, right? His name is Nafi', Malik, Nafi' ibn Malik. The hadith of Nafi' Mawla ibn Umar, the hadith of Abi Suhail on his father, the hadith of Hisham on Urwa on his father, or Hisham on Urwa on Umar, and the hadith of Abi Hurairah. The hadith of Ishaq bin Abdullah bin Abi Talha, that's on Anas. The hadith of Abi Hurairah, that comes after it. Right, the hadith of Abi Hurairah, or the athar of Abi Hurairah, that comes after it. We're going to go in order, but we need to talk about them together. Just like the hadith of Anas from Ibn Abi Talha, Ishaq ibn Abdullah bin Abi Talha, and the hadith of Anas from Mawla Salama, Abdullah bin Rafi'. Those hadith need to be talked about together because they're basically the same narration. So this hadith, Malik, he says, and Nafi' Mawla ibn Umar. Nafi' was the freed slave of Abdullah ibn Umar. Abdullah ibn Umar had a slave known as Nafi'. And they say Nafi' was acquired either from al-Maghrib, right, from that which is after Egypt, from the slaves that were conquered or that were taken from the Muslim conquest in Africa, or he was taken from Persia. They disagree, but a majority of them say he was of Persian origin, right? Either from Kabul, right, or from other areas in that Afghanistan region, which was part of Persia at that time. Nafi', and we don't know a lot about his lineage. We don't know a lot about his lineage, except that he was from the most reliable people in Abdullah ibn Umar. Abdullah ibn Umar had a lot of people who would narrate on him. From the most honorable of them was Abdullah ibn Umar's son, Salim ibn Abdullah. And we talked about Salim, we said that he was from the Fuqaha as-Sab'ah. But right there with Salim, and some people say even a little bit better than Salim, was Nafi'. Was Nafi', the freed slave of Abdullah ibn Umar. From his prestige and his preciseness in Abdullah ibn Umar, they say about him, we don't know of any mistakes he made in the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar. Meaning, when it comes to hearing a hadith from Nafi', we haven't been able to record any mistake that he made in the hadith. So whenever you see a hadith from Nafi' on Abdullah ibn Umar, then know that it's the best it can be. So much so that Bukhari, when they talk about what is the most authentic hadith, right? We know what the most authentic book of hadith is. It is Sahih Bukhari. Bukhari is above Muslim. And then when they talk about the most authentic hadith, they talk about it in different ways, right? So for example, you might have a hadith that has so many different sources that it's undeniable, like a mutawatir hadith. And that's more, that there could be a hadith that's mutawatir, that's not in Bukhari, that's more authentic than a hadith that's in Bukhari because of it being mutawatir. So they talk about the most authentic hadith from that aspect, an abundance of verifiability. But when they talk about the most authentic hadith as it relates to a particular hadith and the chain of that hadith, then this is something that the scholars have disagreed about. This is something that the scholars, they disagree about. What's the most authentic hadith? And al-Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, his view was that the most authentic hadith you can get is a hadith that is from Malik, on Nafi', on Abdullah ibn Umar. You can't get a hadith better than that. And they used to talk about it, they would say silsilatu dhahab, the golden chain. This is the golden chain of hadith, meaning Malik and Nafi' and Ibn Umar is the best hadith you can get. خاض به قوم فقيل مالك النافع بما رواه ناسك مولاه واختر حيث أنه يسند الشافعي قلت وأنه أحمد. Right? Al-Iraqi rahimahullah ta'ala, he said in his poem, and the people they argue about it. So it's been said Nafi' فقيل النافع خاض به قوم فقيل نافع سبحان الله قاض به قوم فقيل نافع سبحان الله فقيل مالك النافع. Thank you, I couldn't oversee what I was missing. So al-Iraqi, he said that a group of people have argued about it, so they say, some of them, that the best chain is Malik on Nafi' bima rawahu nasikhu or nasiku, right, according to that which was reported by a nasik, Ibn Umar. قلت وعنه يسند بما رواه الناسك مولاه أنه وقت حيث أنه يسند, who was the one who freed him. And you should choose from that chain when they mention it by way of Shafi'i. So Abdullah on the Prophet, the best person to narrate on Abdullah was who? Nafi'. Who was the best person to narrate from Nafi'? Malik. Like, you can't get a chain better than that, right? Imam on Imam on Imam, right? Like, who's the best person to narrate on Malik? Al-Shafi'i. قلت وعنه أحمد. Al-Iraqi said you got to add one more to that. Who was the best person to narrate from Shafi'i? Ahmad. And there are several hadith that have this chain, right? And it's scholars have written books gathering up all of these chains that they talk about. Ma qila fihi asahhul hadith. Any chain that has ever been said about it, it's the most authentic hadith. But this chain right here, Malik on Shafi'i, Ahmed on Shafi'i, on Malik, on Nafi, on Ibn Umar, I mean, that's an amazing chain. And there's like 13 something hadith that we have with this chain. Nasik means the extreme worshipper. And Nasik, bil kaf. And Nafi', this was his condition. He was sent by the Khalifa al-Mahdi to teach the people the Islam in Egypt. So he was later sent out of Medina. He was from Medina, or he was amongst the scholars of Medina, but later on was sent to the people of Egypt to teach them. He died in the year 117 or 116. Some people say before, some people say after. But the reason why we say 117 is to remind us of who? 116 to remind us of who? Remember, when it comes to birthdays and death days, the easiest way to do it is start putting them together. Does anybody remember who died 116? Somebody recent that died 116. We'll say Nafi died 116. The stronger opinion is 117, but you can say 116 to remember, right? Who else? There was somebody else who died 116, 117 as well. Al-A'raj, Abdul Rahman ibn Hurmus, right? They both died in the same year. Where did Al-A'raj die? He died in Egypt too, right? So you see that, like, these things help you keep it all together, right? You got to give yourself little tricks to help you memorize. So this was Nafi'. ثقة أخرج الإمام ثقة حافظ أخرج له الجماعة. Every one of the 6 books narrated his ahadith. He's not part of this chain, but his name was mentioned, so we'll mention him. Abdullah ibn Umar. He's not part of this chain, but his name was mentioned, so we'll mention him. Abu Abdul Rahman, Abdullah ibn Umar ibn al-Khattab ibn Nawfal. Who was nicknamed An-Nasik. His nickname was An-Nasik. And there's a competition between him and Ibn Abbas. right, from the later Sahaba, there's a competition between him and Ibn Abbas. Who was more knowledgeable? Him or Ibn Abbas? Right? And so they talk about Ibn Abbas, radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, was perhaps more knowledgeable. And this is where Ibn Abbas gets the nickname Al-Bahr, the ocean, and Al-Habar, right, the extreme scholar, right? Habar, a scholar of religion. But you found that the people often prefer the knowledge of Ibn Umar, radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. The people would often prefer the knowledge of Abdullah ibn Umar, and it's because of what Abdullah ibn Umar was described with from his devotion and worship. And this is a lesson for the student of knowledge, that it's not enough to have information. فَكَمْ مِنْ شَخْصٍ لَهُ عِلْمٍ. How many people have information and have knowledge, right? And it's not to mean that Ibn Abbas didn't have an abundance of knowledge, right? An abundance of action. But it shows us that the preference in the sight of the people is based on what they can determine by and what they can judge by. Who can judge your knowledge? Who can judge your knowledge? Either somebody who knows more than you, so, right, what does it matter? Or even more than that, Allah, He's the only one who knows what you know, right? So what do the people, when they're looking to determine who are they going to follow, what are they going to use as their criteria?
Action.
Your actions. And so it's important that an individual have actions, and this is a little bit benefit from the relationship between Abdullah bin Umar and Abdullah bin Abbas. And if not, then they had a close relationship. These two, amongst two other Sahaba, were known as al-Abadila, the four Abdullahs. There were four Sahaba who were named Abdullah, who were all close in age, who lived long, that they became known as the four Abdullahs, al-Abadila. And these four Abdullahs from the people of Medina, if they agreed on something, it's as if it was the religion. You wouldn't find them agreeing on it, except that it was almost certain it was the religion. These four Abdullahs were Abdullah bin Abbas, wa Abdullah bin Umar, and Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr, and Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, radiyallahu anhum ajma'in. Right, these four were the four Abdullahs. Abdullah ibn Abbas might have been the most knowledgeable of them. And Abdullah ibn Umar was the most devout of them. And Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr was the leader, right? The one, a sayyid, a sa'id, al-qa'id from them, right? The one who was known for his leadership and his role. We know this, he became one of the khulafa. He was one of the khulafa after Yazid ibn Muawiyah. And likewise, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As was from the cleverest of them, and those who had a lot of information and a lot of hadith and a lot of information of the previous people of the scriptures. And so these four individuals were known as al-Abadila, and the four Abdullahs. And Abdullah bin Umar, from his qualities as well, as he's one of the 7 people who narrated the most hadith. Right? He's one of the 7 Sahaba who narrated over 1,000 hadith, coming in rank, if I'm not mistaken, after Ibn Abbas, because it's Abu Hurairah, and then I want to say either Ibn Abbas or Anas, but I think it's Anas, and then Aisha, and then I think, if I'm not mistaken, Abdullah ibn Umar. Now, so Abdullah ibn Umar is from the 7 Sahaba who narrated the most hadith, who narrated over 1,000 hadith. He accepted Islam young, along with his father, before he reached puberty. He was still a kid, and he chose to accept Islam when his father accepted Islam. And this was before Hijrah. Right? We know that Umar, he accepted Islam maybe sometime after the first Hijrah, the Hijrah to Ethiopia, so somewhere around year 5, right? Year 6 maybe. And Ibn Umar accepted Islam along with him. and he made hijrah. And when he made hijrah, they say that he was about 10 years old. So we know that Ibn Umar was born the year that the Prophet ﷺ, or should I say 3 years after the Prophet ﷺ became a prophet. He was born 3 years after prophethood, 10 years before hijrah. And when he got to Medina, he tried to go fight in Badr, and he tried to go fight in Uhud, but he was deemed too young. And then the next year, during the Battle of Ahzab, the Battle of the Trench, Ibn Umar was allowed to fight because he had reached 15, right? And this is one of the reasons why we know about that puberty is reached at 15 if no other signs are accomplished first. If they don't gain pubic hair, if they don't ejaculate, if they're a woman and they don't reach their period, by the time they turn to 15, they reach puberty. How do we know? Because Ibn Umar wasn't allowed to fight in Uhud. He was deemed too young. And Uhud was a jihad that the Sahaba went out to, and Ibn Umar wasn't allowed to go because he was 14. But the next jihad, the following year, the Battle of Khandaq, he was allowed at the age of 15. And so this is how we know, this is one of our evidences for knowing that 15 is when a person reaches puberty if they don't have any of the signs before that. Bulugh. So Ibn Umar, he participated in al-Ahzab and all of the battles thereafter. And he was from those who gave the bay'ah underneath the tree. So he's from the best and the most noble of the Sahaba, al-Muhajirun al-Awwalun. Ibn Umar, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Ni'ma Rajul Ibn Umar. Or he said, Abdullah Rajulun Salih. Abdullah is a righteous person. Or Abdullah is a good person. And for the Prophet ﷺ to say this about you is a high tazkiyah, right? You don't get anybody talking good about you greater than the Prophet. Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, there's a lot of qualities about him, but from the things that we'll end up with, or that we'll close off with, is that he was known to avoid the fitna. And he didn't have any wavering as it came to implementing the religion. Right? We talked about his devoutness. That devoutness is what we mean, that he didn't hesitate when it came to wavering the religion. He didn't waver or hesitate when it came to practicing the religion. If somebody did something wrong, he would cut them off, even if he was his child. And he avoided the fitna. And he was the one that the people would look at to see how they should act during the times of the fitna. Right? The situations between Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqafi, the ruler who created a lot of fitna for the Muslims at that time, the people were looking at Ibn Umar to see how he would act and respond to him. And Ibn Umar was known for avoiding the fitna, so much so that when some of his children recanted their pledge of obedience, he boycotted them. Also, the advice that he gave to al-Hussein about leaving to go to Karbala, to go to Iraq, when those individuals there called him and invited him, was well known. He advised him not to go, right? Don't do anything that could cause fitna. So Ibn Umar was one who was away from fitna. And this aversion to fitna made him a leader, even though he never held a position. He never held governorship, or he was never a wali. He was never in charge of a province or anything like that. He stayed in Medina and was never in charge. But it got him leadership. So much so that Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, he told Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, after he made Hajjaj the governor of Medina, don't disobey Ibn Umar about anything. He told Hajjaj, don't disobey Ibn Umar about anything. So if Ibn Umar would have said something, the governor of Medina would have had to listen to him. Like, Hajjaj didn't like that. Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, he didn't like that. So from what is said, is that he commanded someone to take a spear that was dipped in poison. And when they were on Arafat and making Hajj, that individual scraped the foot of Ibn Umar, and from that injury, Ibn Umar died shortly thereafter, after returning from Hajj. Right? And so this is how he died, radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, in the year 74 after Hijrah. And so we see he lived a long life, right? He lived a long life in Islam. To be born 10 years before the Hijrah and to die 74 years after the Hijrah, that's 84 years, right? 84 years, more than 60 of it being the reference point for the Muslims, right? So this is Ibn Umar. He died in the year 74. What?
I didn't know how he died.
This narration, it says, عن نافع مولى عبد الله ibn Umar. Oh, one thing we forgot to mention about Abdullah ibn Umar. Obviously, Umar had other children. But him and Hafsa, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, were full brothers and sisters, right? This is why he has positions that others didn't have. But Abdullah ibn Umar should not be confused with another person named Abdullah ibn Umar from the Tabi'een, right? Abdullah ibn Umar ibn Hafs ibn Asim ibn Umar ibn al-Khattab al-Umari, right? Abdullah ibn Umar al-Umari. And why is this important? You'll find out in some narrations people get this mixed up all the time, right? There you have Abdullah ibn Umar, the Sahabi. And then you have Abdullah ibn Umar and Ubaydullah ibn Umar, two brothers. And they have other brothers, Al-Qasim and other brothers, right? Abu Bakr, I think, as well. These individuals, they're known as Al-Umari. Abdullah ibn Umar al-Umari. He is the son of Hafs ibn Asim, the other son of Umar. Umar had other children, and from his children was Asim. And you guys know Asim was the father of the mother of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, right? Finding out these familial connections is fun, right? It lets you know how the relationships work. So Asim had a son named Hafs, and Hafs had children. From them was Abdullah ibn Umar. Abdullah ibn Umar al-Umari, da'if. Yeah, he's da'if. But he was a worshiper. He's somebody who was well known and was a worshiper, but he was da'if. Ubaydullah ibn Umar al-Umari, alim imam. Right? His brother was thiqatun imam. And so it's important that when you see Abdullah ibn Umar in a chain, you have to know the levels, right? You might read a hadith that says, and Abdullah ibn Umar on somebody from the Sahaba or somebody else from the Tabi'een. And you might think, oh, Abdullah ibn Umar narrated on this Tabi'i. And you'd be wrong. You see what I'm saying? Because you got to know that there's an Abdullah ibn Umar al-Umari, who's also famous, even though he was da'if, right? This narration, when we look here, why do we bring that up? Because this narration says, عن نافع مولى عبد الله بن عمر أن عمر بن الخطاب كتب إلى عماله. طيب. Nafi'. The correct view is that he never met Umar. The correct view is that he never met Umar. Right? Umar, we know he died in the year 23. Umar died in the year 23. Before that, let's talk about Umar real quick. Umar ibn al-Khattab, Abu Hafs. وَمَا يُدْرِيكُم مِّنْ Umar, al-Faruq. Right? The one who his nickname was al-Faruq. The qualities of Umar are too abundant to be discussed. And it's sufficient of them that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, if there was going to be a prophet after me, it'd be Umar. If there was going to be a prophet after me, it would be Umar. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, I saw in a dream that I was given milk to drink. And I drunk until I was quenched, until the milk was coming out of my nails. And then I gave the leftover drink I had to Umar. And they said, what do you interpret that to be, O Messenger of Allah? He said, I interpret it to be knowledge. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the people were presented in front of me in garments. And some of them had garments that were long and short. He described the different lengths. And then he said, and I saw Umar dragging his garment behind him. And so the people said, what do you interpret that to be, O Messenger of Allah? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, a deen. I interpret that to be the religion. This is how much religion that Umar had with him. We all know the hadith when the Prophet ﷺ saw in the dream that he saw Abu Bakr carrying the buckets after him, and he was carrying them with a little bit of weakness. And then Umar took them up, and he's never saw anybody carry them so strongly. That was his leadership. So you have knowledge, religion, and leadership. These are some of the greatest qualities of Umar ibn al-Khattab. So much so that the Prophet ﷺ, he said that if the shaitan saw him, he would take a different path. Right? So Umar, وَمَا يُدْرِيكُم مِّنْ Umar. The only person who you can say is better than Umar that wasn't a prophet is Abu Bakr. And from the strange things, and what I mean strange is not like strange, but like from the things you've probably never heard before, is that some of them would say Umar is better, right? There were from the set of those who preferred Umar. Or if it was, is it a Shabi, where he said if somebody was to say Umar was better than Abu Bakr, I wouldn't blame him, right? But the reality is that Abu Bakr is better. But it just shows you the value of Umar. We know Abu Bakr is better because the Prophet said, I was weighed against the entirety of my nation, and my weight was heavier than theirs. And then Abu Bakr was weighed against the entirety of my nation, and he was heavier than them. And then Umar was weighed against the entirety of my nation, and he was heavier. So it shows that the Prophet was better, Abu Bakr was second, and Umar was third. Umar himself, he said, I never beat Abu Bakr to any good, except Abu Bakr got there first. And in the life of Abu Bakr and Umar, there is a great example for us to learn about how to compete in doing good. Because all Umar ever wanted to do was beat Abu Bakr. All he wanted to do was beat Abu Bakr in doing some righteousness, right? Until even after the Prophet ﷺ had died, and the people were separating and it was time to choose a leader, and they went to Bani Saqifa, that home where the Ansar were at, about to choose a leader from themselves. And Umar said, and I had chosen some words to say that I was really amazed about what I'm about to say is going to be, it's going to be on point. And I'm going to say it in front of Abu Bakr, and here it comes. It's my chance. And so I got ready to talk, and Abu Bakr said, sit down. And he began to talk, and wallahi, there was nothing that I wanted to say except that he said it better than me. And I knew from that moment I'd never beat Abu Bakr, right? The point is, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, Umar was an amazing companion. And he was born 10 years after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he was born 10 years after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he died in the year 23, like we mentioned. And so he died at the age 63, just like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he was buried next to his two companions, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Abu Bakr. From the things that Umar did, first off, from the things that Umar did is Allah sent down so much Quran proving Umar right. They call these topics muwafaqat Umar. The things that Umar said, and then Allah sent down Quran to prove him right, to agree with what he said. Like the women wearing hijab, like what to do about the captives of Badr, like so many other examples. They mentioned over 15, if not 17 examples in the Quran where Umar said it first. When the Prophet had stayed away from his wives, he said, Asa rabbuhu in tallaqakunna in yubdilahu azwajan khayran minkunna. And then Allah sent down Quran, Asa rabbuhu in tallaqakunna in yubdilahu azwajan khayran minkunna. So like this Umar, from the things that happened with him in the life of the Prophet is that, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah agreed with so much of what he said. So much that there's books written about just the ayat that Allah sent down agreeing with Umar. From the things that Umar did, he was the first one to be called Amir al-Mu'mineen, right? To get this term, leader of the believers. He was the first one who was given that term. They say he was the first one to set up a police system in Islam. The first one to set up a mail system in Islam. He was the first one to gather what they call a dawaween, right? The welfare system. During that time, the rulers, they used to give everybody stipends. And so Umar was the first one to gather that up, and he would pay the people this government assistance based on their status in Islam. So many things that Umar did first. He was the first one to suggest to Abu Bakr to gather Quran in the book, right? All of this, and you can find these type of things. These type of points are always interesting to me in a subject or in books known as al-awa'il, the first person to do something, right? And you're going to find that Umar has a lot of chapters in books like that, the first person to do something. Umar ibn al-Khattab ibn Nawfal. SubhanAllah, from the qualities of Umar, just look at how many people around him are going to paradise. Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nawfal, his cousin, the one who the Prophet ﷺ said is going to be raised up as an ummah on his own on the Day of Judgment. Zayd's son, Sa'id ibn Amr ibn Nawfal, right? One of the other 10 people promised paradise. Umar's daughter, Hafsa, our mother, Hafsa binti Umar, radiyallahu ta'ala anha. So Umar ibn al-Khattab, like we say, he died in the year 23. You can read up about him. It's important that you read up about him because our love for Umar is something that's necessary. Anyway, back to the narration. The author, or should I say Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, this hadith is not connected because Nafi', he never met Umar. He never met Umar. So this is what they call mursal khafi, or just mursal, right? Mursal khafi, if you guys remember, we said a mursal khafi is when you were around the same time as an individual, but you never learned anything from him. In a regular mursal, we said, a lot of them say it's when a tabi'i says the Prophet said, but they also use it for anything that has a person missing in the chain. And so this narration from Nafi on Umar is mursal. Why would Malik? You guys know that the Muwatta of Imam Malik is the first Sahih book, right? Right, before Bukhari and before Muslim, Imam Malik wrote a book, the Muwatta, that is the first Sahih. Ash-Shafi'i said there's no book under the sky that's more authentic than the Muwatta of Malik. And from the qualities of Malik, he would not narrate weak hadith, nor would he narrate on weak people. If he thought you were weak, he wouldn't even narrate on you. So Malik is one of those people that they say about him, just the person's presence in his book is a tawthiq. It's somebody saying that this person, that Malik said that this person's good. Because he wouldn't even narrate on you if you were weak, right? And there's obviously exceptions and rules. Like, it's not a blanket statement, but it's a good starting principle that Malik, like people like Muhammad ibn Ajlan and things like that, they wouldn't narrate on weak people. So the fact that they narrated on you is a tawthiq from them, right? It's a ta'dil. So if Malik would only narrate authentic hadith, why would he narrate this hadith that's inauthentic? It's disconnected. Nafi' never met Umar. So Nafi saying that Umar did something, how does he know? He wasn't there. Huh?
Maybe he heard.
Maybe, but he's still with maybes. Right? So before we get to the maybes, the thing we'll say for sure is that what was Malik's view about a mursal hadith? It's a proof. Malik would use a mursal hadith, no problem. And this was the case of the people, the older generations, this was normal. Right? وَاحْتَجَّ مَالِكٌ كَذَا النُّعْمَانُ وَتَابِعُوهُمَا بِهِ وَدَانُوا, right? Malik and Abu Hanifa would use them as a proof, and likewise their followers. Because early on in Islam, who would lie about the Prophet? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? Who would lie about him? Right? And so it was uncommon that you would find somebody in the tabaqa of the tabi'een, the older tabi'een, lying about the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Right? They didn't start checking the chains until after the fitna. Right? It's a narration that says, but then after the fitna, we would say, Sammu lana rijalukum. Tell us who you got that information from. What's the name of the person you narrated that on? But before the fitna, they wouldn't ask those type of questions because it was far-fetched that somebody would lie on the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So when you're talking about the level of the older tabi'een, like Nafi', for example, you'll find a lot of times that the narrations will be more so, right? You'll find that Sa'id ibn Musayyib will say the Prophet ﷺ said something. And that's a proof with a lot of the older generation, right? And Imam al-Shafi'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, he came after that and said, you know what, no, because when we really research this information, we find that sometimes they did narrate on weak people, and so we got to be careful in our religion. And so Shafi'i, rahimahullah, he made it more tight. But the earlier generations, no, it was easy with them. And that's up until the fitna. Tay, what was the fitna? Because you got to know when he says until the fitna. Until Umar was killed. Or Uthman. That's the fitna that we're talking about. So when you're talking about Umar died in what year? 23. When did Uthman die? 35, right? 34, 35. And so we have to know that if there's somebody who was around during that time, before that moment, it's not strange for them to narrate a hadith that's mursal. But that being the case, from the things that we rest assured about in our religion is they heard it from somebody. They heard it from somebody. And so when we study the different versions and the different riwayat, we find that some of them mention this narration on Nafi, on Safiya bint Abi Ubaid, or Abi Sa'id, I forget. Abi Ubaid. Safiya bint Abi Ubaid, if I'm not mistaken, on Umar, right? And so that's one of the versions that's inshallah authentic, connecting it from Nafi to Umar. Others of them mention it on Nafi' on Abdullah ibn Umar. But a lot of them say that those narrations are a typo, right? Because it's not preserved from Nafi' on Abdullah ibn Umar on his father, right? And so like we see in this, and this is something that's important to like look at. In this book we see it says what? Nafi', the what? The Mawla of Abdullah ibn Umar. It's not far-fetched to mistake an in there somewhere. You see what I'm saying? On Nafi' and Mawlahu Abdullah, or and Nafi' and Abdullah ibn Umar, right? And things like that happen all the time, especially because they didn't have dots, right? The way that they wrote was different. And so when you're seeing this, it's easy to see how somebody might transpose it in a later book, thinking it was Nafi', and this is why studying the different riwayat become important. And that type of information is what they call ma'rifatul ilal, knowing the hidden weaknesses. You see a narration that says Nafi' on Abdullah on Umar. You think you got what? You think you got the golden chain, right? And we know Nafi' narrated on Abdullah bin Umar, and we know this is from the hadith of Nafi'. Is it unlikely that Nafi' narrated on Abdullah bin Umar? No, it's possible. And so you find this chain and you say, aha, I got it. I got the golden, this is not, but this is why knowing the hidden weaknesses in hadith is something that takes a lot of ittila. You have to be able to look from above to see all the hadith, to know that, you know what, this seems to be a mistake. right? Because just by looking at it, you couldn't tell it was a mistake. But when you know enough about the hadith, you say, you know what? No, this looks like a mistake. This isn't the hadith of Nafi on Abdullah ibn Umar. This must be a misprint. This must be a mistake. And that was a science that was important then, and it's still important now. It was important then, obviously. Why is it still important now? Well, I mean, isn't the hadith done? The hadith are done. We're not getting new ones. So why does it, like, the scholars have already gathered the hadith and the books are already there. Why is it important now to know the hidden mistakes? Where does that become and when I mean not the classical hidden mistakes. Yes, we need to know what the scholars said about the old hidden mistakes, but are there new hidden mistakes? Yes, there are. There are new hidden mistakes. You're reading out of a book. How do I know how do I know? For example, in school the other day, we were narrating a hadith on Bukhari. قال البخاري حدثنا عصام بن خالد قال حدثنا حريز ابن عثمان أنه سأل عبد الله بن بصر هل رأيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أكان شيخا؟ قال كان في عنفقته شعرات بيضاء أو أبيض. كان في عنفقته شعرات بيضاء أو شعرات بيض. كان في عنفقته شعرات بيض. The point of it is that Bukhari says Hariz ibn Uthman. I'm on my app. I'm looking at the hadith. It's everywhere. I find it in the Musnad of Ibn Ahmed. In the Musnad of Imam Ahmed. And Jarir ibn Uthman. Which one is it? You see what I'm saying?
Looks similar.
Because Hariz and Jarir, same thing, just different dots. So you have to pay attention to that. Even in the books that you have nowadays, in the Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shayba, there's a narration on Hafs Abdullah ibn Abi Talha. Or is it Hafs ibn Abdullah ibn Abi Talha? You have to be aware of those things because the manuscript can change the whole hadith, right? And so that's why that science is still something that is valid today, meaning we have to be aware of the old hidden mistakes and we have to be aware of the new hidden mistakes, the things that come with books. Books are done now. Everybody's on the apps. We have to be aware of the new hidden mistakes that come on the apps, the websites. We have to be aware of the new hidden mistakes. Chat GPT or whatever.
Yeah.
That AI where you can ask it and it gives you an answer. You just ask it a question. What's the hadith on Umar in Salah? And it just puts it up there for you, right? People are going to start doing what? Asking the AI. The AI is going to give them the answer and they're going to take it as what? Deen. But there needs to be from us those who are doing what? Keeping an eye on it, watching it, making sure it's not slipping anything in there, right? And so that's why it's necessary, the little bit that we're doing right now. Who cares, you guys? Muwatta Imam Malik is already printed in the book. What difference does it make if you memorize it or not? Right? You ain't going to be the shit if you memorize Muwatta Imam Malik. You ain't going to be no right? What good is it? And it's okay to narrate from your book, right? It's okay to narrate from your book, and why are you so precise? فَقَالَ عُرْوَةً فَقَالَ عُمَرُ لِعُرْوَةً. Why can't it just be قَالَ عُمَرُ لِعُرْوَةً? Why you gotta be so precise, Paul? Every time you wa ila sallu sub. You could just say wasub. It ain't a big deal. They narrated it like that, didn't they? Didn't they narrate the hadith like? If you go to the Muwatta of Imam Malik, how many different riwayat are there? Some of them say sallu sub. Some of them say wasub. Some of them say فَمَنْ حَفِظَهَا. Some of them say مَنْ حَفِظَهَا. It's not a big deal. Why y'all so precise? Now relax. And in yourself, that's okay. In yourself, it's okay. Relax. Right? If you say فَمَنْ حَفِظَهَا, if you say مَنْ حَفِظَهَا, it's not a big deal. In yourself. But if your goal is to help make sure you preserve the religion, then this is why the preciseness. Because we're not going to let Chat GPT or whatever else add a fa where it doesn't belong. And we're going to be precise about our memorization in our books to say, no, Yahya bin Yahya said, فَمَنْ حَفِظَهَا. But Abu Mus'ab, he said, مَنْ حَفِظَهَا, based on the manuscripts that we have. You see what I'm saying? And so these are some things to be conscious about when we talk about, okay, this narration was mursal, but it is connected. But it's not connected from Abdullah ibn Umar. And you have to be conscious of that subtle mistake. And Abdullah, Mawla Abdullah ibn Umar, Anna Umar ibn al-Khattab, right? Anna telling us about a story that happened. And we said if the person that is telling us the story wasn't around during it, then Anna is not connected. It's not connected. Anna Umar ibn al-Khattab kataba ila ummalihi. طيب. Al-ummal al-wula, right? The government workers that he had in charge of various places. These were the people that were in charge of running the various cities for him. From them was who? Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari was the governor of Basra. So it's the same story. Kataba ila ummalihi. From them was Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. And we'll talk about Abu Musa al-Ash'ari and the correspondences between him and Umar later on. Because Abu Musa al-Ash'ari and Umar, they used to have a lot of correspondences. And from the things that are about the correspondences of Umar and Abu Musa is what? Something else that Umar was the first person to do.
Make a government.
The calendar.
Oh, okay.
Umar was the first one to make a calendar for the Muslims. Like, who told him to make the calendar? Abu Musa. He said, yeah, Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sometimes we get a letter from you, it says Rabi al-Awwal. We don't know if it's this year or last year. Right? And so Umar gathered the people together to figure out, let's make a calendar for the Muslims that we can keep track of our dates. So Abu Musa and Umar, they used to have a lot of correspondences. And so Umar would always write to the people that he put in charge. He put Abu Musa in charge year 17. We'll delay that. We'll leave that when we talk about Abu Musa. Kataba ila ummalihi. The point is that Umar, from his qualities, was sincere advice. This is from a nasiha to the leaders of the Muslims and the common people. If you're in charge of something, man istar'ahu Allahu ra'iyatan, whoever Allah puts in charge of something, then he has to give it his best effort of giving it sincere advice. And there is very few examples greater than Umar in this. He used to walk the streets at night, right? Checking on the people, almost spying on them to make sure they're okay, right? And we know the story about who later became the great grandmother of Umar ibn Abdulaziz, was that young girl who said to her mother, who was telling her to mix the milk with the water, but Umar says don't. She says, Umar ain't here. Well, if Umar's not here, then the Lord of the skies and the earth is. And then Umar married her to his son Asim. The point is that Umar used to pay attention to everybody. And so from his sincere advice is that he would write to his leaders telling them how to act towards the people. Write to the leaders. Because the people follow the leader. It's from the things that is well known that al-awam liman sabaq. The awam, the general people, follow behind those who are in front. And so this is why it's necessary for us, the people of the Sunnah, to be in the forefront of everything that we can be in. If you're going to be a truck driver, be the best, be in the leader of the truck driving industry. Because the common people, they're going to want to be like who? If you're in business, if you're in culinary arts, if you're in politics, whatever you're in, you need to be the best. The best of the people in that field need to be the Salafi so that the people can follow them. because the common people follow behind those who are in front. And a famous expression in Arabic is that the people are on the religion of the king. The people, an-nas ala din al-malik. The people are on the religion of the king. So whatever religion the king is on, that's how the people are going to be. And so it's necessary. This is why Umar would write to the leaders telling them how to act. For the sake of benefit, there's a fabricated hadith that Ibn Abdul Barr mentions in this topic, and he doesn't draw attention to the fact that it's fabricated. Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah is the one who pointed out that it is fabricated. He mentions صنفان من أمتي إذا صلح صلح الناس الأمراء والعلماء. There's two groups of people from my ummah that if they're righteous, all of the people are righteous, the leader, the rulers, and the scholars. And although the meaning is sound, just keep in mind that narration, Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala, he said it's fabricated. So Umar would write to his leaders, to the people that he put in charge. كتب إلى عماله أن أهم أمركم عندي الصلاة. The most important matter that you all can do, in my opinion, is salah. Right or wrong?
No.
Huh?
بعد العقيدة.
Say by the aqidah. He said the most important thing y'all can do to me is salah. See, this is a proof against y'all Salafis always saying the most important thing is tawheed, right? Sometimes. Some things are obvious, but you have to be able to articulate them.
Right.
Who was he talking to?
Muslims.
Not just any Muslims.
Muwahhidun.
Not just any muwahidun. Sahaba. Who did he put in charge of these places? Did the Sahaba know tawheed or not? أَجَعَلُوا الْآلِهَةِ إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا إِنَّ هَذَا لَشَيْءٌ عُجَابٌ. Not only did the Sahaba know tawheed, the kuffar knew tawheed back then. So Umar doesn't have to tell them the most important thing with me is, for you, is tawheed, because it's already established. Walillahi alhamd. Right? We're already establishing tawheed. Right now, I want to tell you about the thing that you need to do, and not just you. Why was he writing to his leaders? For the people.
They're the heart.
Right? أَهَمَّ أَمْرِكُمْ عِنْدِي الصَّلَاةِ. And without a doubt, the salat is the most important action that we can do. We'll talk about the narrations about it before finishing the rest of the statement. And this is because the salat, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, أَوَّلَ مَا يُحَاسِبُ بِهِ الْعَبْدُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ الصَّلَاةِ. The first thing that the slave will be judged about it on the day of judgment is the salah. And in the narration with al-Tabarani and others, he says, so whoever his salat is good, then everything else about him is good. And whoever his salat is corrupt, then everything else about him is corrupt. And so the salat is a protection for everything else. Right? You guys know the statement that the voluntary actions were made to protect the obligatory actions. So by doing the voluntary actions, it's more likely that you won't leave off the obligatory actions. And the salat is a protection of the rest of the actions. If you're doing salat, it's going to help you to do all of the other actions. Inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. Salat stops you from the indecency and from that which is disapproved of. But if you're not doing the salat, فَهُوَ لِمَا سِوَاهَا أَضِيعٌ. He's going to be more likely to abandon that which is besides it. If you're not doing what's more important, are you going to do what's less important? And so you have to maintain the salah. And the narration of Hudayfa radiallahu ta'ala anhu was from the people who used to ask the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about the evil. مَخَافَةً أَن يُدْرِكَنِي. Right? Out of fear that he would fall into it. He said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the أول ما تفقدون من أمر دينكم, the first thing you're going to lose from your religion is khushu'. Right? And the last thing that you'll lose is the salah. Meaning that once you lose the salah, it's over. If you've lost the salat, then you've already lost everything else before it. فَهُوَ لِمَا سِوَاهَا أَضْيَعُ. There's a narration of Hudayfa and other than him, Jabir. He says that the ura of Islam will be untied, right? The ura, the handholds of Islam will be undone one by one. Every time one of them is undone, the people will try to cling on to the one that was before it, right? We're hanging on to Islam. MashaAllah, we was all the way at the back. We had fara'id, we was at the end of the book. And then somebody took off fara'id, we grabbed onto the one before it. And somebody took off zakat, we grabbed onto the one before it, until the last one that they grab onto will be the salah, right? And so whoever, once the salat is done, there'll be no more deen. That's why the Prophet ﷺ, he said, بَيْنَ الرَّجُلِ وَبَيْنَ الْكُفْرِ وَالشِّرْكِ تَرْكُ الصَّلَاةِ. Between a person and between falling into shirk and falling into kufr, or falling into kufr and falling into shirk, is salah. الْأَحْدُ الَّذِي بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَهُمَ الصَّلَاةِ مَنْ تَرَكَهَا فَقَدْ كَفَرَ. The only thing that separates between us and them is the salah. Whoever abandons it, then he's become a kafir. So, من حفظها أو حافظ عليها حفظ دينه. Umar said, whoever guards it or guards over it, guards his religion. الحفظ هي المراعاة من الضياع. Hifz, when you say this word, we all know it, حفظ, right? It's to maintain something so it won't be lost. Right? You understand now when you say Hafiz al-Quran, right? Is it just to, I said it and now I got the ayat in my head? What do you got to do? It's to maintain something so it doesn't get lost. Right? Today you memorize the hadith. Anta hafiz? Are you a hafiz of the hadith? Are you a hafiz of Quran? Not until you do what? Yalla, say the word. Until you maintain it. Mura'ah min al-daya'. You have to maintain it, right? That comes with that effort. Think about the name of Allah, Al-Hafiz, Al-Hafiz. What does Allah do?
Preserve, maintain.
He maintains you. It's not just He put you in a safe place and left you, right? Allah didn't put you in a box and leave you there. Allah maintains you every day. He gives you something else. He makes sure you're fed. He makes sure you're drinking. That's why Allah is called Al-Hafiz, right? Because it's to maintain something in order that it won't become lost. It's to maintain something in order that it won't become lost. So Umar is saying, Man hafidha. What's going on, Akhi? Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
I was trying to come holler to see if you know somebody hiring for a job.
For a job, right now, unfortunately, no.
Okay.
Did you try to, you got a driver's license?
Yes, sir. I
You
got
got-
CDL.
You got to see it. I was about to say, you got to see it. Yeah, you should never be without a job.
Nah.
But I know it's hard right now on the road. But I don't know anybody right now hiring, unfortunately. No problem. So Umar says, "Man hafidhaha," whoever maintains it from being lost. Aw hafadha alayha, or what's the difference between hafidha and hafadha?
Protects.
Protects, maintain it from being lost. He just said that. What's the difference between hafidha and hafadha?
Maintains. Same.
This is where that understanding in Arabic, this is where our scales come into play. What's the difference between fa'ala and fa'ala?
That one is a little bit exaggerated.
Think about the words that you know. Qatala, qatala. What's the difference?
Doing something.
Qatala,
قاتل.
qatala, huh? They fought. So it's between what? Two different parties, right? Jalasa, jalasa. What's the difference?
You said.
He sat with. Jalastu fulan. It's both of us doing it. Right? Ada. they're mutual enemies. Hafadha is that someone gives you something to maintain and take care of and commands you with it, and then you do it. Man hafadhaha, man hafidhaha, oh hafadha alayha. Right? It has that extra effort in it. Somebody gay, I say, yeah, hold this phone for me, don't lose it. Right? Every day, make one call just to make sure it still works, charge it, keep it charged. Right? Hafadha alayha. For that reason, Allah is not described with al-Muhafadha. From the names of Allah is al-Hafiz, al-Hafiz, right? Allah yahfaz. But we don't say about Allah, Hafadhahullah. We say Hafidhahullah. Because al-Muhafadha is that somebody gave you something and commanded you to take care of it, and then you maintained and preserved it. Does anybody give Allah something? Does anybody command Allah with something? But you don't say Hafadha as it relates to Allah. You say Hafidha, right? Hafidhahullah, right? Obviously, but not obvious if you don't know, right? So, man hafidhaha aw hafadha alayha. Is it just saying the same thing with emphasis? Is it just he wasn't sure which one he said? For example, man hafidhaha aw hafadha alayha. Did Umar say one or the other, or did he say both? In other versions, he said man hafidhaha wa hafadha alayha. So that would mean that there's a difference between the two. They say hafidhaha if you're saying there's a difference. If you're saying they're the same thing, they're the same thing. Allah gave you the obligation to take care of it, take care of it. But if you're saying that he meant something different between hafidha and hafadha, then what was he trying to say? Allah does it in the Quran, right? إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى صَلَاتِهِمْ دائمون, and then at the end of it, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى صَلَاتِهِمْ يُحَافِظُونَ قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. What? And then to the end, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى صَلَوَاتِهِمْ يُحَافِظُونَ. So it's giving that difference, right? There's different things that we can be doing about our salat. Hafidhaha, they say it's to preserve it with the actions that you do in the salah. Are you standing correctly? Are you bowing correctly? Are you making a ruku'? Are you doing the wajibat? Are you doing the arkan? That is man hafidhaha, right? You are guarding it. Wa hafidha, not o hafidha. This narration, o hafidha. But other versions, wa hafidha alayha, and they protect it, i.e. from outside. Right? Hafadha alayha. They're guarding it from outside, i.e. they're guarding the time. They're preserving it, making sure that they're doing it in the right time. They're not letting other things attack it from outside of itself. So hafidhaha is to do it right. And hafadha alayha is to make sure nothing stops you from doing it right. Right? Are you praying on time? Are you removing distractions? Are you doing the things that are keeping your salat safe? And then are you praying salat correctly? So hafidhaha would be praying correctly, and hafadha alayha would be doing the things that keep you praying correctly. What's the biggest thing that keeps you praying correctly? Fearing Allah is part of the salah. What's the biggest thing that keeps you making salat correctly?
Sunnah.
Sunnah is one of them. But sunnah is voluntary. This thing I'm talking about is obligatory. The time. The time is one of those things that makes sure you're praying correctly. فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ sahun. By making sure you're praying on time, you're guarding your salat itself. Because that's going to make sure that you're doing it right, as opposed to the one who delays it and does it later. When the adhan comes and you got time and you go pray, it's not like the one who waited till the last 15 minutes of the time and then said, oh man, I gotta hurry up and pray. The salats are different. You know what I'm saying? And so, man hafizaha, whoever does it good, and hafiza alayha, and guards it, i.e. by making sure the time is right, because that's going to make sure you're doing it good. Hafiza dina. Then that person has preserved his religion in totality. Like we talked about from the hadith of, not Hudayfa, not Jabir, the hadith of Anas. He said it was the hadith of Anas in Tabarani. And likewise Abu Hurairah in Al-Hakim. The hadith of Anas. And then Umar said, وَمَنْ ضَيَّعَهَا وَمَنْ ضَيَّعَهَا. طيب. الضياع is to misplace something. To lose it, to lose where it was at, to not know where it was placed. Whoever loses it, whoever misplaces it. Notice he didn't say man tarakaha. No. Tarak is different. Tarak is to leave it. Man tarakaha faqad kafar. He said man dayya'aha. Whoever misplaces it. Right? You're not a kafir per se, right? By delaying it. You still prayed. But you did what? You prayed out of time. فَخَلَفَ مِنْ بَعْدِهِمْ خَلْفٌ أَضَاءُوا الصَّلَاةِ وَاتَّبَعُوا الشَّهَوَاتِ فَسَوْفَ يَلْقَوْنَ غَيًّا. Allah says in Surah Maryam, a group came after them who lost the salah. The daya is different than tark. Daya is to misplace it, right? They pray outside of time, right? They're busy talking, they waste their time. The next thing you know, oh, it's Maghrib, I ain't even pray Asr yet, right? فَمَنْ ضَيَّعَهَا فَهُوَ لِمَا سِوَاهَا أَضْيَعُ. He's even more likely to lose or misplace that which was before it. Like we said, salat's the last thing. If you can't do salat on time, subhanAllah, if you can't do salat on time, how are you going to do everything else? Nasma' min qawm. We hear from people nowadays. Jihad, qital, this and that. Alam tara alladhina qila lahum kuffu aydiyakum. Have you not turned to those who were said to them, hold back your hands, wa aqimus salat, and establish the salah. If we can't come together praying on time, nansab imam, we'll be able to raise up a Muslim ruler, right? We don't give our money correctly. I don't have the time to learn about the rules of zakat. What do I have to give? When do I have to give it? Who do I have to give it to? When it comes time for zakat, what does everybody do? Take the box, drop it at the masjid. That's on y'all. I don't have the effort to give my zakat. I'm gonna have the effort that is needed to establish an Islamic society. Haven't you seen those who were said to them, hold back your hands, it's not the time for fighting. Well, aqimus salah, establish the salah and give the zakat. And then when it was written upon them, qital, they feared the people the way they should have feared Allah, because they didn't have that foundation. If you can't hold on to salah, how you gonna do this other stuff? Right? If you can't guard the salah, how you gonna do this other stuff? Nasallahu yuthabbitana. For that reason, some of the Salaf, they used to say this conversation of the rules that relate to the one who abandons the salat is a theoretical issue, right? They used to say, like the scholars of old, from them are scholars from Andalus, right? This conversation of the person who doesn't pray, is he a kafir or a Muslim? They say, yeah, Ikhwan, this conversation is theoretical. Understand theoretical?
No. Explain.
Nobody. Like, it's not a real thing. It's like in inheritance, we say, what if a person died and he had 100 grandfathers? Or 100 grandmothers? How much did he get? It's like, does anybody die with 100 grandmothers? Is it possible? Maybe they live a long time and, you know, like 100's too much. 15 grandmothers. Every parent has 2. Right? You have 2. Every parent has 2. So that's already 6. And then each of them have 2. If you get 3 generations, all of them alive, maybe 15 grandmothers can happen. But do you know anybody that got 15 grandmothers that are still alive? It's theoretical, yeah. It doesn't happen. We just want you to practice this rule, right? They used to say somebody leaving the salat is the same kind of conversation. It's not a real thing. Who leaves the salat? Like, think about that in their mind. This issue of who leaves this, it's a theoretical issue. We don't see anybody doing it. نسأل الله الثبات. نسأل الله يعيدنا إلى العز وأن يعيدنا إلى العمل الصالح. So Umar, he said, من ضيعها. There's grammar rules related to ضيعها, but من ضيعها فهو لما سواها أضيع. Then he's even more likely to abandon that which is besides him. ثم كتب. And then he wrote, right? I want you to حافظ عليها. I'm not just going to tell you to do it and not tell you how to do it. Right? تعليم. وكونوا ربانيون. I'm sorry, وكونوا ربانيين. Be educators. Right? The benefits in these hadith are not just the times of salah. Right? You tell somebody to do something, tell them how to do it. Right? ثم كتب. And صلوا الظهر والفي ذراع. إذا كان في ذراع. Right? كم جلسنا حتى الآن؟ إن شاء الله نبقى شوي, huh? A little bit more. He said, and صلوا الظهر والفيء ذراعا إلى أن يكون ظل أحدكم مثله. Pray dhuhr, and the fay is a dhira. طيب. When does dhuhr start? We talked about this.
The shadow's 1 foot and it moves to the other side. It's time to look.
لا. لا.
Okay, what time is dhuhr?
What time does dhuhr start? لا.
Goes to the other side.
Thank you. No, that's what you were trying to say, but you didn't say it. When the shadow goes to the other side, right? The shadow starts long, and it gets shorter and shorter and shorter. Why is the shadow getting shorter? Why is the shadow getting shorter? The sun is erasing it. That's what they say. الظل ما نسخته الشمس. The shadow, the word dhil, is for the thing that the sun erases. When the day starts, your shadow is what? Huge. And then the sun, as it moves, it erases your shadow. And your shadow does what? Gets smaller. فَالظِّلْ مَا نَسَخَتْهُ الشَّمْسِ is what the sun erases. وَالْفَيْ مَا نَسَخَتِ الشَّمْسِ. The fay is what erases the sun. Huh? The dhil, right? They're both words for shadow, but Arabs, right? Our language is deep. When we say dhil, the dhil is what? What the sun erases, and al-fay is what erases the sun. When the morning started and you were standing up in the ground, this was your shadow. You got a big shadow. What's all this back here?
Your shadow?
No, your shadow's right here. What's all this back here? Sun. All this is sunlight. الظل ما نسخته الشمس والفي ما نسخت الشمس. Right? الظل is what erases, is what the sun erases. And the fay is what erases the sun. All of this was sunlight, and then the shadow started to do what? It started to return.
That's the dhil.
That's the fay.
Oh, that's the fake?
Yeah, the dhil is the one that goes away, right?
Okay.
And then the fay is the one when it returns. So the fay can only be when? After dhuhr. The shadow that's after dhuhr is called the fay. That's why it's called the fay, because it returns, or the sun is bringing it. The sun is bringing it back, i.e., it's erasing the sun, right? So it's called the fay, because fa'a yafi'u, fi'u ila amrillah, Right? So that means return back to Allah's command. Right? So he said, when does Dhuhr start? We say, Dhuhr starts when the shadow stops and then moves to the other side.
You're right.
No. That's what he said here. But we got to remember the other hadith. We didn't talk about it because Imam Malik doesn't mention it specifically, but the hadith of Jibreel was meant to make us remember the other hadith of Jibreel. And the Rasul, and the Jibreel nazala fa salla Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, thumma salla 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 fa salla Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, thumma qala bi hadha umirt. How many times did Jibreel pray? No. 10. He prayed with the Prophet twice for every salat. We have to remember that. Imam Malik didn't bring the whole hadith, but we have to remember that that hadith that he's talking about is that hadith. When did Jibreel, what was the first salat Jibreel prayed? Dhuhr. When did he pray Dhuhr?
At the beginning of its time.
At the beginning of its time. When was the beginning of its time? Don't worry. Umar tells you too. Imam Malik, he's not, remember we just said, you're going to tell somebody how to do something. You're going to tell somebody to do something, tell them how to do it. Imam Malik tells you later, either zaghat ash-shams. When the sun moves. Right? What do you mean either zaghat? When the sun deviates. When the sun, either zagha, i.e., the sun was right here, and then it stopped. You have your shadow. And then the sun did what? Zagh. فَلَمَّا زَاغُوا أَزَاغَ اللَّهُ قُلُوبَهُم. Right? So we know that Dhuhr starts when the sun moves, when the shadow jumps sides. That's when Dhuhr starts. You got to remember that. If that's the case, Umar said, صَلُّوا الظُّهْرِ إِذَا كَانَ الْفَيْ ذِرَاعًا. First thing we have to remember, when they talk about the shadow and the length of the shadow, we're talking about the shadow of what?
Yourself.
The shadow of any object when? No, when the sun stops. When they talk about the shadow, be twice as long, be one time as long, right? One time as long as what?
Within yourself.
No. The time when the shadow stops, right? Because in the north, in the summer, your shadow's going to be long when the shadow stops because the sun is further north and you're further up. Your shadow gets longer. It's not the same as the shadow in the winter. Your shadow will be a different length. All year long, your shadow is at a different length. The same time of the day. Yeah, got me wanting my blackboard. I'm not going to use my phone because I'm recording. They got me wanting my blackboard for the kid. Go to YouTube. YouTube. No. YouTube. Things like this are important to see. It's important to give it some context, right? The Google, YouTube, the positions of the sun through the year. Should come up a YouTube short of the positions of the sun throughout the year.
You can draw it on the notepad.
I can't draw it because you can't see it. It has to be in motion. Somebody took a camera shot of the same time every day. And the sun, no, it's a short.
It's a short.
Yeah. I don't know. That way everybody can see it at the same time. See the time? See the sun?
The black thing is the sun?
The black thing is the sun.
February, March.
It's the same time every day, but the sun is where?
Would
that's if we use their time.
No, it's time. It's not our time, their time. It's time. How do we measure the time of day?
Through the
With
sun.
the sun.
Through the sun. We measure salat based on looking at where the sun is. Every day, the sun is going to be somewhere different at the same time.
Oh, it's the same time.
You see, from sunrise to that amount of time passing. Every day, the sun is going to be in a different position. If you count 30 seconds from when this, or an hour from when the sun rose, every day it'll be in a different position. So that shows you that your shadow every day is going to be what? Different. Where's what at? Where are they at when they recorded the sun? I don't know.
But did they, in the past, when there was
Yes,
time,
they learned all that from us. First of all, you got to remember, okay, side note, what is time?
this position of the sun.
No. What is time? What is الزمن? What is الدهر? لا تسب الدهر فأنا الدهر أقلب الليل والنهار بيد الأمر أقلب الليل والنهار. Hadith al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet said, don't curse time. Because Allah says, I am time. And my hand is control. I alternate the day and the night. What is time? This is an important Aqidah issue. Most of the science of the people nowadays is what was Einstein famous for? When they talk about physics nowadays, you know, everybody wants to be what is physics? What's that thing that they talk about now? Space, time. Right? Time is a big concept, right? You probably never asked yourself the question, what is time? Is it a creation?
No.
Yeah, it's a creation, because everything is a creation if it's not Allah. And time is not Allah. But hold on, Allah said, and ad-dahr. But ad-dahr, now you see what Rasulullah would say? This hadith, when Allah says, I am time, time is not one of Allah's names. Because some people would think that time is one of Allah's names, right? But time is a creation. Time is the measurement, the distance between one action to another. Al-masafa bayna hadathin ila akhir waqt. That's why, how do we measure time? What's the main thing we use to measure time? No, the main way we keep track of time. No. Calendars. Calendars are more important than the sun. And we measure it because in the calendar we have everything. You see what I'm saying? يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ قُلْ هِي مَوَاقِيتٌ لِلنَّاسِ وَالْحَجِّ. They ask you about the crescent moon. Say it's a way to do what? Keep time. When we want to know what day it is, what do? We look at the moon. And I see yesterday the moon was like this. Now the moon is like this. It's a different day. I see the cycle of the day and the night. When the sun goes up and comes down, that's what? That's a daytime. And then when the sun comes back out, before that it was nighttime. And from when it goes down until it goes down again, that's a complete day. I use the motion of the sun to keep track of that. I use the motion of the moon to keep track of time. How do I know the year? I look at the stars and I say, this star was over there. When it gets back over here, it's a year. You see what I'm saying? Because kullun fi falakin yasbahun. All of it is in the falak, which is what we would call our universe, swimming about. Ibn Abbas, he said the falak is that which is between the earth and the sky. When we talk about the sky, we know the sky isn't what? The sky is not what? It's not that blue thing that we see. Right? That's when Allah refers to that in the Quran, وَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً, we sent down from above. But the sky, when we talk about the seven skies, Allahu khalaqa sab'a samawatin, right? The seven skies, we can't get there. When the Prophet ﷺ got to the Sama' ad-Dunya, what happened? Men, Jibreel, who's with you? Muhammad. Ursila ilay, was he called for? Yes. Right? Muhammad couldn't get into the sky, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, without permission. You gonna get in there without permission? Ya ma'shar al-jinni wal-insi in istata'tum an tanfudhu min aqtar as-samawati wal-ard fanfudhu la tanfudhuna illa bi sultan. You can't get into the sky. So we have to remember these realities when we're talking about, because when we speak in English, we say, look at the sky, it's so pretty. What are we talking about? We're talking about our atmosphere and the blue, the reflection, the things like that. But that's not the sky that Allah is referring to in the Quran when he says, as-samawati as-sab'a, the 7 skies. The distance between the earth and the closest sky, we know in the hadith there's a distance of 500 years, right? And that distance is called the falak. Our planets, and there's an issue, some of them say you shouldn't call them planets because planets have a meaning. But the things that we see in the sky, the nujum, the kawakib, all of these things that we see, where are they at? The sun, the moon, where are they at? They're in the falak. And in this falak, what are they doing? They're moving. All of that, all of this astronomy, all of this science, all of that came from us. We would sit down on boats and look at the sky and say, New Year. All of these things, we use it to keep track of time. Right? هو الذي جعل الشمس ضياء وجعل القمر نورا. Right? All of these things are how we keep track of time. The only thing that we don't know how to keep track of by a sign is what? The only thing that we don't have a sign to keep track of it is what? It's another Aqidah question. There's a period of time, a day. Do we know how to keep track of it by a sign? Can we look and see the sign of a day? Can I know when it's a new day just by looking? Yes. Can I know when it's a new nighttime by looking? Can I know the time of the day by looking? Yeah. I know when it's Asr, look at my shadow. I know when it's Dhuhr, I look at my shadow, right? Can I know the month by looking? No. Can I know the day of the week by looking? Yeah, the day of the week. I look at the moon. If the moon is full, what day is it? 13, 14, 15. Ayyam al-Bid. It's the white days because the moon is full. When it's half of that, 6, 7, 8. When it's half of that the other way, 21, 22, 23. You see what I'm saying? Or 19, 20, 21. So I can keep track of the days of the week by looking. I have a sign to know that. Can I keep track of a year with signs? If I'm really good, I can look and see the star. It was over there, and now it's back over here. When it's over here, it's a new year. I can keep track of the year. What's the only thing I can't keep track of with a sign? The week. How do I know one week from another? There's no sun. The sun doesn't do something in 7 days. The moon doesn't do something in 7 days. Why isn't it an 8-day week? Why isn't it a 6-day week? Why is there a 7-day week? Why is there a 7-day week? Think about it. Why everybody you've met, their week is what? 7 days. I get it in the month. We can look at the moon and we see the moon goes through a cycle. It's a new month. I get everybody. That's where the word month comes from, moon, right? I get that. But how does everybody have a week? There's no sign to know that this is a new week. How do we all have a week? 7 days. It's right there in front of you. Why do we all know there's a week?
Is it mentioned?
It's revelation. Allah told us. And this is one of the things that prove Allah, right? The only people you find having 8-day weeks, 6-day weeks are people who want to do mukabara. They just want to be different and have a different time. Because if not, everybody knows a week is what? 7 days. Like, why is it 7 days? Hakadha khalaqaha Allah. That's the way Allah created it. And then the Jews looked for the day. They chose Sept. And then the Christians looked for the day. And they chose Ahad. But Allah did what? He guided you to the day that they missed. Jum'ah. So they were in front of us in time, behind us in preference. Because our week, that's why we take it Eid. Celebration, we finished our week. Yallah, bismillah. Anyway, you had a question real quick before I go back to what we were talking about.
I was going to say, like, when the position of the sun, was that the time of the season or the time of the day?
It was the time of the day during the different seasons, right? So now we know that time is just the measurement of one action to the next. Allah says he created the skies and the earth in 7 days. What was not there when he did that? When Allah created the skies and the earth, what was not there? I'll make it easy for you. What's a day? There you go. The sun and the moon weren't there. He created them. But he still called that time what?
Time. Oh.
A day.
Yeah.
Right? It was just a different way of measuring it. One action to Allah did this and did that. That's a day. وَإِنَّ يَوْمًا عِنْدَ رَبِّكَ كَأَلْفِ سَنَةٍ مِمَّا تُعُدُّونَ. A day with your Lord is like 1,000 days of how you count. Time is different. Different perspectives. What are you using to measure? So the point of it is that when we talk about the sun, we're using it to measure the time, but our shadow is going to constantly change every day. And so when does Dhuhr start? It starts when the shadow stops. Sometimes the shadow will be, I wish I had a light, like this doesn't help. Sometimes the shadow will be here. Sometimes the shadow will be here. Sometimes the shadow will be here. But wherever the shadow stops, that's what they call midday, high noon, muntasaf al-nahar. And then once the sun, zagh, it's now Dhuhr. And wallahi, like these are like amazing. Like that's why I love like working with the children, because you see these things and you see the. Have you ever watched the shadow fall? Like just watch a shadow move. Wallahi, it's amazing. Like I remember sitting on a bus stop one day, and I was like just looking at the ground, and I just saw my shadow move. It's amazing. And literally, if you go out and you're standing and looking at your shadow, it'll be like this, and it'll be like that. Allah made it easy for us to keep track of these things. So Dhuhr is when? It starts once the shadow moves. Now back to the hadith. And we'll stop at this one as we go along. And like I said, the hadith, they're going to mix up together. So why did Umar say, إِذَا بَلَغَ الشَّمْسُ ذِرَاءً? Meaning a dhira above whenever it stopped. A dhira is the fourth of the length of something, right? A qama is what you are, right? Your height is called your qama. A dhira is a fourth of that. From here to here. You think that's a fourth of your body?
Of your body.
This is probably a fourth of my body. Yours is probably a fourth of your body. You see what I'm saying?
When you measure your
1, 2, right? When I stand up, 3, 4. So a dhira is rub al-qama, right? That's how they got that measurement. It's a fourth of the stature of something. So when the shadow gets 1/4 as big as it was, who said the Salaf weren't precise? Who said they didn't know these things? They couldn't keep track of time. They didn't have a Timex. But we were able to look and say, oh, here goes my shadow. Once my shadow gets 1/4 bigger than it was when it stopped, that's when Umar said pray. Right? صَلُّوا الظُّهْرِ إِذَا كَانَ الْفَيْء ذِرَاعًا. Why did he wait so long? We said the time starts the moment the sun moves. But in this hadith, he's saying pray dhuhr when the shadow, when the faith is a dhira, when it gets 1/4 as big as it was. Why did he wait so long? Till it cools down. But what if it's wintertime? He didn't say in the summer. Because the masajid for the community need to be based on the community. And the people who pray in the masjids in the community, are they all the same? So you need to take into consideration the people who walk from a further distance, the people who walk from a closer distance, the people who have a hard time walking, right? So don't just see the sun move, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. No, give the people a chance to get to the masjid, because the point of the jama'ah is what? The jama'ah. Like, look at like things you never really even thought about. Is it the sunnah to have a prayer clock and to make the salah at a specific time so that people can get to the salah? You might have some young people say, man, that's a bid'ah, man. What are you doing this, man? Your life needs to be based around the salah. And that's true, right? your life needs to be based. You just listen to the adhan and you do whatever you. No, akhi, it's okay to make a time that's convenient for the people to get to the masjid. Right? If the people in charge say that we're going to pray at this time, it's okay. Don't make it an issue. Because who did that? Umar. He told his governors, make the time that the people are going to pray. Something that everybody knows they can get there when the shadow grows, right? The same way we have an adhan app on our phone that goes off supposedly at the same time. The same way they had an adhan app on their shadow. Oh, the shadow just moved. Okay, I got some time to get to the masjid. Let me go home. Let me make wudu. Let me pray my sunnahs. And let me start going to the masjid. In addition to the adhan that would be in the street. So it's okay to do these things. Is it okay to use something to keep track of the time to know when to pray? Okay, these prayer charts are bid'ah.
Did they use anything?
We just talked about in the hadith of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. When Urwa told him, what did Umar do after that? He used to make a sign to know when to pray Asr. I'm not going to miss it again. I'm going to make a sign so that I know once the sun hits there, it's Asr. كان يصلي العصر والشمس في حجرته قبل أن تظهر. Okay, I'm going to put a little hole in my roof. And once I see that beam of light come in here, Asr time, I'm never going to miss it again. The Salaf did stuff like that. Now, we don't do it the same way. We don't have to have mirrors and, control. You ever seen like the pictures when they did all the geometry and made those special things where the sun hits this thing at a certain way? Alhamdulillah, we just got a clock. We got a chart. It's okay. You don't have to make it a bid'ah. Because you find people making big issues off of stuff like this. We have a salaf in it. So Umar was telling him to make the salat delayed so that the people could get to the masjid. Not because that's the beginning of the time. And so you have to know that in this hadith. That he's saying in this narration or this athar, delay the salat a little bit for the people to get to the masjid. And sallu dhuhr, إذا كان الفيء ذراع إلى أن يكون ظل أحدكم مثله. And you got all the way up until when the shadow of one of you is equal to you. You got all of that time. You want to delay it more? You want to delay it less? It's no problem. But this is the time that you have to pray dhuhr. وَالْعَصْرِ وَالشَّمْسُ بَيْضَاءٌ نَقِيَّةٌ. In another version, in the version of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, and Asr, when the sun is high above, murtafi'ah, bayda naqiyya. Same thing like we saw in the hadith of Aisha. Murtafi'ah, it's still high in the sky. It's still above you. Bayda, it's still white. Qabla an yadkhuluha, or qabla an yadkhulaha, sufra. It's still white. The yellow hasn't entered into it yet. Bayda, naqiyya, pure, clean. It hasn't changed, right? So pray Asr when the sun is still bayda naqiyya, like we have here in another version, murtafi'ah, still high in the sky, bayda naqiyya, telling them to pray Asr during its early time. Wal maghrib idha gharabat ash-shams. That's easy, right? Maghrib is when the sun sets. Once you know the sun is set, pray maghrib. Oh, I'm sorry. Jazakumullah khair. قدر ما يسير الراكب فرسخين أو ثلاثة. طيب. In the narration of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, he says, قبل الغروب. Before a person can travel 2 or 3 farsakhs before the sunset. You got to know that there. Because if you don't understand that, you're just saying the pray Asr when the sun is high in the sky, white and pure, unchanged, enough time to go 2 or 3 farsakh, parasangs, leagues. Right, we'll talk about it in a second. The point of it is, go where? Go there before what? Enough time for you to go this distance. I can go there before what? Time, it has to be some end point. What's the end point? Enough time for you to travel that distance before Maghrib. So, the first thing. What's a farsakh? Farsakh, here, kalimatun farsi in its origin, if I'm not mistaken. Right? Iranian, Persian is origin. Do y'all use the
No.
huh?
We are not using farsakh.
Yeah. Farsakh is, in English, they translate it as a parasang. I've never heard the word pronounced in English, but I've seen it written before. Parasang.
What is that?
Huh?
Horse?
No, it's a distance.
Ah.
In English, the equivalent of it is a league. Like, you ever heard the book 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne? It's a distance, right? A league is a distance that an army would cover in a specific amount of time. A farsakh is the distance that an individual could walk in a specific amount of time. A farsakh, one farsakh, right, is 3 meal. 3 meal. Mile. Whose word is that? It's ours. How big is a mile? The same size a mile is today. It's almost exactly the same, right? When we say mile, you got to go 5. This is one thing America got right. Right? Because you go everywhere else in the world, what do they use? Kilometers, kilometers. Right? America said, la, 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 la.
La la la.
We're going to stick with the mile. We're going to stick with the meal. And that's what we use. Our distance is a meal. A meal, why is it called a meal? Why is it called a mile? In Arabic, it's called a mile because if you're on a flat piece of land and you look as far as you can see before you can't see anything else, that's a meal. As far as you can see before your eyes, right? It's a meal. Or they call it that because of the curvature of the earth, right? And know that the Muslims knew the earth was round, right? They say that as far as you can see, and if you're sitting on a flat plane and you see like how a ship falls under the horizon, if you're watching a boat fall under the horizon, that distance is a what? It's a meal, because that's as far as you can see before the ship dropped below, right? And so that's why they call it a meal. A meal is approximately 1,609 meters, right? So 1 meal is about, so 5 meters is a farsakh. I'm sorry, 5 kilometers is a farsakh, right? 5 kilometers is a farsakh. 3 meals. 3 farsakh, they call it a burd. 3 farsakh, they call it a burd, right? This is another measurement that they used to use back then, right? A burd is 3 farsakh. And I forgot what they call it, but like a burd is like sending something, like a letter, right? It's the distance that you can travel in a day, right? A burd. 3 farsakh. 3 farsakh, every farsakh would be 3 miles, so it would be 9 times 3 would be 27 miles, right? قدر ما يسير الراكب. The amount of time it would take a person riding to travel 2 or 3 farsakh. 2 farsakh is how many miles? 6. 3 farsakh is how many miles? 9. How long does it take a person riding to travel 6 to 9 miles? How fast can you walk? Average normal walk. You never done this? Exactly. You never walked it. How long does it take? You ever walked a mile? How long did it take you?
Maybe 20 minutes.
About 20 minutes. About a 20-minute mile is a decent walk, right? That means in an hour you can walk what?
3 miles.
About 3 miles, right? Some people walk faster, some people walk slower. The average horse, they say it moves about 2 to 4 miles an hour walking. So if you're riding on your horse, are you racing it? Are you running it? Are you galloping? I'm headed down to Bani Amr ibn Auf. We prayed Asr with the Prophet ﷺ, and we would make it to Bani Amr ibn Auf. ثم يذهب الذاهب إلى قباء ثم يذهب الذاهب إلى قباء فيأتيهم والشمس نقية. والشمس مرتفعة. So the point of it is that this horse is going faster than you can walk. So that means you would be able to go this distance, like to put it in perspective, from Medina to Quba, which is one of the hadith we're going to come with later, right? From the Prophet's masjid to Quba, how far is it? It's 2 miles, right? It's Milan. If you look at it on Google, it's about a 50-minute walk. On a horse, it's about 30 minutes. So if that's 2 miles, if I add another third, you say 40 minutes, something like that. 40, 50 minutes to go 3 miles on a horse. After that, I add another 3, and add another 40 minutes, 50 minutes, add another 40, 50 minutes, and that's how long? Hour and a half, almost 2 hours, right? That's how much time you should have between the praying Asr and before Maghrib comes in. You see what I'm saying? Because they would get from the Prophet's masjid to Quba in about 30, 40, 50 minutes. The sun is still up. The sun is still high. But Umar says in this narration, قَدْرَ مَا يَسِيرُ الرَّاقِبُ فَرْسَخَيْنِ أَوْ ثَلَاثًا. And when you do all of this math together, you see that it all adds up. Today, Maghrib comes in at what time? Asr comes in at what time? 3:58. Comes in at 3:58. Yeah, Asr. Comes in at 3:58. You pray at 4:18, it comes in at 3:58. Adhan, wudu, walk to the masjid, make salat. By the time it's done, what time is it? By the time we're done praying, what time is it? 20 minutes, another 10 minutes to pray. It's 4:48. How much time between that and Maghrib? Less than 2 hours. About 50 minutes 3 times, about 40 minutes 3 times. You see what I'm saying? And so you see that these are fun exercises to do. Like when the Salaf are giving these examples of how they measured stuff, like figure out how they measured it to keep track of how you're doing it. Alhamdulillah, we got a clock, we got our adhan time, right? But if I was in a place that didn't have all that, they would recite after Fajr, after the adhan from Fajr, the first adhan to the second adhan, how much time would pass? Enough time for 50 ayat. How long did it take to read 50 ayat? قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. I took 4 small ayat. Multiply that by 10, 11, 12, that's 50 ayat. And that's how much time should be the first adhan and the second adhan. You want to take long ayat, Surah Yusuf. You see what I'm saying? Like this is what you do with this information when you get it. When the Salaf said they would take this amount of time or that amount of time, so we can know how to be precise like them. I'm taking too much of y'all time. So let's knock it off. Let's go. قَدْرَ مَا يَسِيرُ الرَّاكِبُ فَرْسَخَيْنِ أَوْ ثَلَاثًا. The distance that a rider could travel 2 to 3 farsakh. قَبْلَ غُرُوبِ الشَّمْسِ. Before the sunset. In some of the narrations, قَبْلَ الغروب. He says, وَصَلِّ الْمَغْرِبِ إِذَا وَالْمَغْرِبِ إِذَا غَرَبَتِ الشَّمْسِ. Maghrib, when the sun completely sets. Once you know the sun set, then you know for sure that it's Maghrib time. وأخر العشاء والعشاء إذا غاب الشفق. طيب, الشفق, there are 2 shafaq. There's the shafaq al-ahmar and the shafaq al-abyad or al-asfar. The majority of the scholars are on the opinion that the shafaq that is referred to for the beginning of Isha is the leaving of the red shafaq, the red traces of light in the sky. This is the Hanabila and the Jumhur. The Ahnaf, they say the shafaq that is being referred to is the white shafaq, right? The white shafaq. And this is also something that some of the early Muslims adopted, and the Shia, right? That's why you might find a scholar who, like Abdul Razak al-San'ani, he used to not pray Maghrib until the stars were out, right? Because in their view, Isha is when the white shafaq leaves. And you can see the stars when there's still a little bit of whiteness in the sky. And so the majority say the shafaq that is being referred to is the red shafaq, while the Ahnaf and others, they say that it is the white shafaq. So once that red traces leave from the sky, it is no longer time for Maghrib. And that is a big difference in time. That is a large amount of difference in time. If you count from when the red leaves to when the white leaves, it's almost about half an hour. Right? It's almost about a half an hour. It's hard for us to see the white because of our city lights, but if you count the difference, it could be about 15, 20 minutes to a half an hour. And that makes a difference. And so that's something to be conscious about, and that's why you see that a lot of scholars, they say there's only one time for Maghrib. There's a lot of scholars who say that there's only one time for Maghrib, and that's immediately. And this is why Jibreel, when he prayed it with the Prophet ﷺ on both days, he prayed it at the same time. And some of them say that it is haram to delay Maghrib past immediately. And what do they mean by immediately? They mean enough time to get ready to pray Maghrib. So whatever you need to do from adhan, wudu, if you're fasting, a small iftar, pray Maghrib. And you cannot delay Maghrib past immediately because the time to pray Maghrib is very tight, and Jibreel, he prayed it with the Prophet both days at the same time. That's as it relates to the choice time period. As far as the necessary time period, and whoever catches a raka'ah before the shafaq leaves, then he's caught Maghrib. وَالْعِشَاءِ إِذَا غَابَ الشَّفَقِ فَمَنْ نَامَ فَلَا نَامَتْ عَيْنُ فَمَنْ نَامَ فَلَا نَامَتْ عَيْنُ فَمَنْ نَامَ فَلَا نَامَتْ عَيْنُ. We'll delay this part to the next hadith, the next hadith, وَأَخِرُ الْإِشَاءِ مَا لَا تَنَامْ. We'll delay this portion of the hadith until then, inshallah. وَصَلِّ الصُّبْحِ وَالصُّبْحَ وَالنُّجُومُ بَادِيَةٌ مُشْتَبِكَةٌ. And pray subh when the stars are badiya, when the stars are out. Meaning it's still dark outside. The stars are out. Badiya, you can see them. They're apparent. Mushtabika. Not only can you see them, but you can see a lot of them. They're mushtabika. They're like a net, as many as they're intertwined. Right? And this is the opposite of Isha. Right? Isha, they're red in the sky. Once that leaves, the stars have just come out. Right? You should pray Fajr before the red comes in the sky. Right? When the red comes in the sky, it erases the stars. So you should be praying Fajr when it's still dark, i.e. in that white light is across the horizon, but the stars are still out, intertwined. Right? When nujum badiyatun mushtabika. Right? This is what does it mean? Badiya, they're out, and they're so many. You can see a lot of them. The red hasn't entered the sky yet. And we'll talk more about this when we talk about al-ghalas and the other narration of Abdullah bin Umar. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Any questions about any of that?
When we say most of the scholars, is that considered consensus?
No, there's no consensus without all. And when we say most of the scholars, it means nothing. When the people say most of the scholars, when they talk about the majority of the scholars, they're talking about the majority of the scholars of the four madhahibs. Most of the time when you see them say, well, jamhur, because how do you know who most of the scholars are? All right? There have been thousands upon thousands upon thousands of scholars. How are we going to say most of them? Right? And if that's the case, then you calling me a liar? Right? Because you would have to say I'm lying if I say most of the scholars, and it's not most of the scholars. And Muslims are above that. We're not going to speak in hyperbole just to make it seem a certain way if we're trying to be honest. So when they say most of the scholars, the majority of the scholars, they're talking about the majority of the four schools of thought, right? So when we say in this issue, for example, the majority of the scholars say that the red is what needs to leave the sky, we're talking about Malik, Shafi'i, Ahmed, as opposed to Abi Hanifa, right? When we say the majority of the scholars say any issue, we're talking about it usually in confines of these four madhahib or those that you add on to it as well, like from the other madhahib that have gone away and things like that, to where there's some limitations, but there's no consensus unless it's all of the scholars, right, of a particular generation. All of the scholars of that generation have to have said it. And if all of the scholars of a generation don't say it, no matter if the only one that didn't say it was the youngest of them, who just barely caught their generation. Like, for example, we talk about the tabi'een. And let's look at the Sahaba. That's easier. Who was the last Sahabi? Abu Tufayl, right? He died 110. The last Sahabi died 110, 111. Right? The Prophet said there's not going to be anybody on the earth ma min nafsin manfusatin after 100 years. And that Sahabi died 100 years after that, Abu Tufayl, from the companions of Ali. Let's say he's the only Sahabi who disagrees with everybody else. He's the last one, right? Is it an ijma'? Every other Sahaba says something different. He says no. This is hypothetical. This is not a realistic thing. But hypothetically, every Sahabi says the answer to this question is A. He says, no, it's B. Is that an ijma'? Can't say it's an ijma'. Because is he a scholar from that generation? Is he a scholar? He's a Sahabi. Is he from that generation? He's a Sahabi. No ijma'. Right? Khalif ibn Khalifa, or Khalif ibn Khayyat, I forget what's the last name. Some of them say he's the last tabi'i to die. The last tabi'i to die, I think he died like 180. People disagree, was he a tabi'i or not? But Khalif ibn, I'll give you his name. Akhir, 180. Akhir التابعين موتا. Khalif ibn Khayyat, if I'm not mistaken. The last Sahabi to die was Abu Tufayl Amr ibn Wathila al-Laythi. The last Tabi'i to die was Khalif ibn Khalifa. Khalif ibn Khalifa al-Kufi. He died in the year 181, according to what I'm looking at right now, but I've also seen 180, if I'm not mistaken. The last Tabi'i to die was Al-Hasan ibn Arafa al-Abdi al-Baghdadi. He died in Samra, the year 257 Hijrah, on 120 years of age. I didn't know that. Al-Hasan ibn Arafa. Al-Hasan ibn Arafa al-Abdi. 257. So he died after Bukhari, subhanAllah. Right? So if he was the last Tabi'i to die, was Khalif ibn Khalifa. Right? He died 181. Right? He died after Imam Malik. Imam Malik wasn't a Tabi'i. Right? Let's say all of the other Tabi'i have an opinion and he has an opinion. That's different. Is it ijma'? No, it's not. Because he's part of that generation. You see what I'm saying? Tayyib. Now we have a problem. Let's say all of them have an opinion except Imam Malik has a different opinion. Imam Malik died before him. Did Imam Malik reach that generation? Yeah, he reached that time period. It's not an ijma'. Because all of the scholars of that particular period of time have to have the same opinion. And they have to articulate that opinion. Right? It can't just be that nobody said anything different. They have to articulate it. They have to say, this is our opinion. Right? If not, they call it ijma' sukuti, and there's disagreement about ijma' sukuti. Right? So it has to be something that all of the mujtahidun of a particular time have said. If they all agree, then it's an ijma'. If one of them disagrees, no ijma'.
So Jumhur is the madahib?
Most of the time, when they say Jumhur, they're talking about the madhab. Sometimes they might be talking about the Jumhur in their school of thought. وَجَمْهُورُ أَصْحَابِنَا يُقُولُونَ كَذَا. Sometimes they might be trying to say the majority of Muslims because it's a very, like for example, the majority of the Muslims say water is 3 types. Right? That's true. Historically, the majority of the Muslims have said water is 3 types. Right? Now, does the Jumhur make it a proof? Ijma' makes it a proof.
Ijma makes it a proof.
Does the majority make it a proof?
No.
No. Right? That's why we find that there's a lot of examples of people, and these are things that often cause problems, but the Jumhur becomes what it is in your area most of the time. Like right now, if I tell you what do the majority of the Salafis believe about eating at McDonald's? It's halal, right? Until you go to California. What do the majority of the Salafis out there you think believe?
health reasons?
The majority of the Salafis that I've met from that reason say no. It's not permissible. But that's also because of who their teacher is and who they learn from, right? And who they took as their example. Like Sheikh Farid, rahimahullah, had a big influence out there. And he didn't eat from those places. You see what I'm saying? And so the Jumhur can change based on your time period. Like right now, if you were to say the majority of the scholars say water is how many types?
Right now?
Yeah, right now. 2. Because most of us have learned from the madrasa that came through Ibn Taymiyyah, through Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, and through the ulama of the Najd. And then it's the right opinion as well. But that information becomes prominent now. You see what I'm saying? And so that's the Jumhur now, in my opinion. But I don't know, maybe if I go to India, then everybody's, no, the Jumhur here is still 3, buddy. Right? So it's one of those things it's perspective. Huh?
So it can be Jumhur, meaning the madhahib, or it can be in your time as well.
It could be in your time. It can be any of those. It just means the majority, however you wanted to use it. But most of the time, the Jumhur of the time, it means the 4 madhahib. Especially when you're looking at books of fiqh, right? وَقَالَ بِهِ الْجَمْهُورِ. And the majority of the scholars have said this. You see what I'm saying? They're going to be talking about the majority of the schools of thought. But that's the thing. Like students, a lot of times we're negligent and deficient in the way that we use it. Most of the time, right, the people of bid'ah in the past, when they wanted to push their opinion, they would say it's a consensus. All the scholars say this. And that's why Imam Ahmed said there's no such thing as a consensus. Right? How you know? Maybe some of the scholars disagree. You're going to say all of them agree. How you know? Maybe some of them disagree. You met even though Imam Ahmed believed in the consensus. Yeah. But he said this statement as a refutation against them and their claim that everything is a consensus. You don't know. Right? The way that the people of bid'ah used to use the word consensus is the way that we try to weaponize the word majority. Right? We have a little bit more wara. We have a little bit more piety. So we don't say consensus on everything. Because if I say consensus, like, how do you know it's a consensus? How do you know there's a consensus? Right? I got to cover all of these scholars and look at all, because they got to say it. I got to know they said it. I can't do that. Right? And so we're a little bit more pious. We say, the majority of the scholars say this, akhi. When I want you to follow my opinion, I weaponize, the majority of the scholars say this. You see what I'm saying? Because that's the way that we use, it's a consensus. Akhi, you going to go against the scholars? Majority of ulama say this, Go look at a majority of ulama say this, right? And so you got to be, you got to be kind of honest in what you say. You know what I mean? How do you know the majority? Have you done research? Or are you quoting somebody else?
Is there a consensus? They say there's a consensus in the rebellion against the ruler.
Who says that?
That's what they say.
That's what those said, not us.
Huh?
That's what they say, not us. There's a consensus that it's permissible to rebel against.
No, that is not. It's not permissible.
That is a consensus that it's not permissible to rebel against the ruler. That's a tricky.
Did you hear that one?
Yeah. That's a tricky concept. That's a tricky concept because another thing that we also don't want to do is open the door for the people of falsehood. We don't want to give the people of falsehood anything to hold on to. So sometimes you just don't say things. You see what I'm saying? Sometimes you just don't say things. Right? For example, the Asha'ira, are they from Ahl Sunnah?
No.
What you mean no? Yes and no. We don't say yes. Because I don't want people to think that the Asha'ira are from Ahl Sunnah. And are the Asha'ira upon the methodology of the Salaf? No, they're deviant. They're astray. They are misguided. But what does Ahl Sunnah mean? The people who claim Sunnah as opposed to Shia. So you might see a scholar who's a Salafi say the Ash'ari are from Ahl Sunnah and mean by Ahl Sunnah, not Shia. Do I have that conversation in open gatherings with common people? No. In lessons and in class, we'll talk that Ahl Sunnah, it depends on how you're using the word. Do they mean this? Do they mean that? But in common gatherings, no, the Ash'ari is not from Ahl Sunnah, like you said. Are there Ash'ari from Ahl Sunnah? Absolutely not. And if I'm talking to a common person, they ask me, the Shia from Ahl Sunnah? No, they're not. And if they try to refute me and say, well, Sheikh so-and-so said they are from Ahl Sunnah, I need to know what they meant. But that's the conversation for class. That's not the conversation for normal people. Is there a consensus that you can't revolt against the ruler? Consensus is a difficult thing because somebody who goes against the consensus has done what? Has committed kufr. Because consensus means that it is no disagreement.
There is reasons why to.
It doesn't make you a kafir, but consensus means what? There's no disagreement. That and consensus has to be based on what? Has to be based on the book and the sunnah. The consensus is an understanding of what's in the book and the sunnah. So if I tell you there's a consensus, that means that where is it at? It's in the book and the sunnah. And you're saying, no, it's not. You're saying I don't have to do it. I say praying 5 salat every day is obligatory by consensus. You say, no, it's not. What's that make you? Kafir, right? And there's levels to it, but the point is that things that are known in the religion by necessity, things that there is a confirmed, unanimous, like going against, that's why they used to say, like the people, you ever heard the statement, al-ikhtilafu rahmah, arguing is a mercy? This is a statement of some of the Salaf, right? Fadl didn't like it just now. Yeah, I heard that. Some of the Salaf used to say this. Because what do they mean? Right? Well, everybody nowadays, we know the opinion, وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ رَبُّكَ وَلِذَلِكَ خَلَقَهُمْ. And they won't stop arguing except, that's why Allah created, except those who have Allah has mercy on them, and for that He created them. How can ikhtilaf be rahmah? And Allah said the only ones who won't do it are those who have rahmah, right? We're talking about fiqh, right? But you have this statement. Some of the Sahaba said ikhtilaf rahmah, right? Why? Because if we weren't allowed to disagree in it, that means if you were wrong, you're a what? You're astray, you're a kafir, you're mubtadi'. But the fact that you can put your hands on your chest and I can put my hands on my side or vice versa in ruku', that stops me from deeming you outside of the religion because one of us is wrong, potentially. You see what I'm saying? And so the point is that this is where the education comes into play. Yes, we all agree that arguing at certain times is not from mercy. And arguing about certain things isn't from mercy. And some of our scholars will be the ones who tell us how can ikhtilaf be rahmah when Allah says, and they won't stop being an ikhtilaf except those that Allah have mercy. That's an exception. So how can ikhtilaf be the exception? But there are salaf who said, no, ikhtilaf is mercy. Right? Imam Malik, when Abu Ja'far al-Mansur wanted to make all of the people follow the Muwatta, what did Imam Malik tell him? Let the people argue. Let the people disagree. Right? Like, not let the people because he has some information I don't have, and we're going to disagree about. So the point is that some things we don't say openly, right, to everybody. Saying that there's a unanimous agreement about not revolting, I don't know. I would say yes after the fact, because some of the people of the past revolted. But they all were remorseful for what they did, right? The fitna of Ibn Ash'ath and things like that, most of them recanted their positions. And so in that circumstance, you would say, yeah, there eventually became a consensus in it.
Right, obviously, later.
Right. And then that's a different issue. Can you have a consensus after disagreement and things like that? But that being what it may, I don't know if there's a consensus or not. Because to know a consensus requires knowledge, and I don't know. So I can't just make that claim. That being the case, is it halal to revolt? No, it's haram. Clear hadith from the Prophet. Clear narrations, clear texts. أَفَلَا نُنَابِذُهُمْ بِالسُّيُوفِ قَالَ لَا مَا أَقَامَ فِيكُمْ الصَّلَاةِ. Right? And then those who revolted, is it possible to carry their action on a misunderstanding? Right? When we talk about ma shajara bayna as-sahaba, what happened between the sahaba, when we talk about the fitna of Ibn Ash'ath, when we talk about these things that have happened historically when some of the pious people have fallen into this misguided action, is it possible to carry their mistake as a mistaken understanding. And a mistaken understanding can't be say that they said it was permissible. You see what I'm saying? And then when you talk about consensus as well, you also have to be precise, right? Like, for example, when they talk about a consensus in salat, right? Oh, not salat is easy, but when they talk about consensus, like, you'll find, like, if you read al-Ijma by Ibn Mundhir, like, the way he'll word a consensus will be very detailed. And they all agree that if you touch your forehead with the back of your, if you touch your private part with the back of your hand, or while, you know, rubbing your knees at the same time, then it doesn't break your wudu, right? Like, why you got to add all those conditions? Because you got to include everybody's statement into this consensus. So when you say, is there a consensus about not overthrowing the ruler? Well, that's, if we're going to say there's not, which I don't know there's not, there might be. But if we're going to say there's not, what are the details of it? There is a consensus that you can't overthrow the Sahaba. Right? I don't think anybody argued with that. I don't think anybody said it was okay to revolt against Uthman. You see what I'm saying? There's a consensus that, you know what I mean, you can't kill a Muslim without just cause. And so how do you going to revolt like this? You see what I'm saying? There's a consensus that you have to listen to the people in charge. Allah says it in the Quran. It's a consensus in that. What you going to do about that? You see what I'm saying? So Allah knows best, but even if the case is that there's not a consensus, are we going to have that conversation in public? So that the people of falsehood can say, see, even the Salafi say there's not a consensus, so this is just ikhtilaf, an issue. We can disagree about this, brother. No, we can't disagree. Same thing about, walaikum salam, same thing about voting. You'll find scholars who say it's okay to vote, but I'm not going to talk about them. For me, that issue is dead. Because the majority say that that issue is dead. You see what I'm saying? And even, I'm not going to give ground to the innovator. Is there ikhtilaf in aqidah? You've heard this statement before. There's no ikhtilaf in aqidah. And people have disagreed about things about aqidah. Did they disagree about Allah's names? Did they disagree about Allah's attributes? Did they disagree about Tawheed? No. But did they disagree, was Iblis an angel or a jinn? I mean, an angel or not? Yes, that's aqidah. Did they disagree about the Jannah that Adam was in? Yes, that's aqidah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar.